This is the story of one of the most tragic incidents in aviation history. Of how a jumbo jet goes berserk, plunging up and down at 7,300 meters. Of how an innocent mistake made years earlier puts over 500 lives at risk, and how investigators literally stumble on the reason behind the biggest single air crash in history. Japan Airlines Flight 123 is uncontrollable. Next.
3,000.
We're not getting any oxygen.
We have the terrain alarm. Even tower Aero Peru 603. We are in an emergency.
This may be the last video ever taken of Japan Airlines Flight 123. It's late summer, and millions are traveling home for a traditional Japanese holiday.
Something exploded. Japan Air 123 request.
The plane is only 12 minutes into its flight when terror strikes. It's out of control, plunging up and down hundreds of meters at a time. And it's headed straight into the mountains that surround Mount Fuji, the tallest mountain in Japan. On the ground, Japan Airlines staff search frantically for the cause of the problem. In Tokyo, air traffic controllers try to guide the plane to safety, while the pilots resort to desperate measures to keep the plane aloft. Tokyo, Japan, August the 12th, 1985. In most of Japan, it's the eve of Obon, when people traditionally honor their ancestors, often returning to their place of birth for family reunions. Tokyo's Haneda Airport is crowded, with thousands trying to get home. On the tarmac, jumbo jets are lining up. Air travel is so popular here that Japan Airlines has to use 747s even for its short internal flights. Tokyo Area Control handles all aircraft over central Japan, including those on their way to and from the city's two big airports, Haneda and Narita. It's 6 o'clock in the evening, but the rush won't be over for hours. Crowded passenger lists and busy controllers make it a typical holiday weekend.
Roger, approved as your request. Cathay 456, turn right on heading 250, climb and maintain flight level 240.
At Haneda Airport, Japan Airlines Flight 123 is boarding. Among the passengers is young Yumi Ochiai. She's actually a flight attendant for Japan Airlines, but today she's off duty. Yumi takes a seat, 4 rows from the back of the plane. At 6:12 in the evening, Flight 123 takes off, heading for the industrial city of Osaka, 400 kilometers to the west. It's filled almost to capacity, 509 passengers and a crew of 15.
Air 123, contact Tokyo departure.
Roger, Japan Air 123. Air 1.
Captain Masami Takahama is 49 years old and one of the airline's senior training captains. On this flight, he'll be handling the radio and keeping an eye on the first officer, who's sitting in the captain's seat. Yutaka Sasaki is flying the plane. He's hoping for promotion to captain. Hiroshi Fukuda, a veteran flight engineer, is the third man on the flight deck.
Tokyo departure, Japan Air 123.
Passing 800.
JAL 123's route will take it south over Enshu Bay, then southwest along the coast, until finally taking a sharp right turn to land in Osaka. The flight will take 54 minutes. Flight 123 is leaving Tokyo behind, climbing to 7,300 meters. 12 minutes into this short flight, the plane's black box shows that all is going well.
Hello, Pet. What's the problem?
Someone wants to go to the restroom. Shall I let him?
The plane's black box records a routine request from a passenger. He wants to use the bathroom before the seatbelt light is turned off.
Careful, please.
An ordinary request on a routine day.
Something exploded.
Air is rushing out of the cabin. The oxygen masks drop down automatically when the air pressure falls. The explosion, the sudden loss of pressure in the cabin. There must be a hole in the aircraft.
Gear door.
Check gear. Gear.
What?
Check gear. Gear.
The pilot's first thought is that the landing gear doors have blown off.
Squawk 77.
7700 is the emergency code. When the crew radios this code to the ground, air traffic control will know the plane is in trouble. Every plane on the controller's screen carries a label giving the plane's identity. Suddenly, the label beneath Flight 123 changes. Someone in the cockpit has keyed in the emergency signal. The plane's crew members are baffled. They know only that there's been a loud noise, some sort of explosion, a subsequent drop in cabin pressure, and a growing loss of control. Yet their instruments offer no clues to the mystery.
Engines.
All engines okay.
Ominously, the pilots can't get the plane to respond.
It's dropping.
Right turn. Right turn.
Hydraulic pressure. It's dropping.
The plane's flight controls are powered by hydraulic pressure. The elevator, which makes the plane go up and down, the rudder, and ailerons, which make it turn. On a big modern jet, all these are too heavy to operate with cables and levers. Instead, they're controlled by hydraulic fluid, which flows in pipes around the aircraft. It's the lifeblood of the plane.
Tokyo, Japan Air 123, request immediate.
Trouble. Request return back to Haneda. Over.
Roger, approved as you request. Turn right heading 090.
Put the mask on securely. Put the band around your head like this.
Don't bang so much.
Yes.
Crew members, please help out with the oxygen bottles. Prepare the oxygen bottles, please.
Don't bang so much. Turn it back.
It won't go back.
Nothing seems to be working. All the controls are dead. They're 7,300 meters up in the air, traveling at nearly 540 kilometers an hour, and unable to control the plane. In the growing uncertainty of the situation, the pilots know they need to get down fast.
Descending.
The controller is puzzled. Instead of making the anticipated 180-degree turn back to the airport, the plane now veers off its course, but not towards Haneda.
No. No, 123. Negative. Please confirm that you are declaring emergency. That's right?
That's affirmative.
Request the nature of your emergency.
Hydraulic pressure all lost. All lost.
No. Look.
All lost. Yes. The company, please make a request to the company, please.
You want to make a fuss?
The crew seem paralyzed and don't radio the airline or answer the tower. The officials on the ground don't know that the plane has lost its hydraulic power, but their screens tell them it's flying erratically and is possibly out of control.
Right turn, descend.
Look at his altitude. Up and down, up and down.
But now, uncontrollable. Put your heart into it or it'll stall.
The hydraulics failure has caused a serious problem. For the last few minutes, the plane has begun flying in an alarming pattern. First, it climbs steeply, then tips over and goes into a terrifying dive of 1,200 meters, only to level off and begin to climb again. This repeats itself over and over again. The pilots cannot understand this bizarre behavior. and they are powerless to stop it. Tokyo Area Control, August the 12th, 1985. The controller receives an emergency signal from a jumbo jet that left Haneda Airport 13 minutes ago.
Tokyo, Japan Air 123, request immediate.
Trouble. Request return back to Haneda. Over.
Put the oxygen mask.
In the cabin, confusion and panic spread like wildfire. There's been an explosion, and now some passengers are gasping for air.
Seatbelt! Seatbelt, please!
Hydraulic pressure has dropped!
The plane's precious hydraulic fluid is gone. That's why the flight controls aren't working properly.
Don't bang so much. Turn it back.
It won't go back.
Airline personnel are trained to take charge in a crisis, and passenger Yumi Ochiai helps out even though off duty.
Children!
At Tokyo Control, the controller is now joined by his supervisor.
JAL 123, he's declared an emergency. Says it's uncontrollable. He says he wants to go back to Haneda, but his heading is all wrong. He can't seem to turn.
Get him to Nagoya. That'll be the easiest. It's a straight line.
The best solution would be for the plane to switch course to Nagoya Airport, which is 128 kilometers straight ahead. But they'd need to start descending immediately if they're going to land there.
Right, your position 72 miles to Nagoya. Can you land at Nagoya?
Negative. Request back to Haneda.
It's a longer runway.
The captain wants to try to get back to Haneda. It's a large airport and ideally suited for a jumbo 747 in an emergency. But it's in the opposite direction.
If he can get it down. 123, can you descend?
Roger.
But the black box shows that he doesn't descend. Without control of the aircraft, they can't. In the thin atmosphere at this altitude, the passengers are finding it difficult to breathe. People without oxygen masks may soon become unconscious. The situation worsens as some of the masks at the back of the plane run out of oxygen. It's been 5 minutes since the explosion, and a flight attendant is finally able to call the cockpit with news about what's happened to the plane.
Yes, what is it?
The flight attendant tells the engineer that the explosion has occurred in the rear of the plane and may have come from the baggage compartment.
So...
There's a baggage compartment furthest to the rear.
Listen, right now the baggage compartment right at the back has collapsed. I think we'd better descend.
They need to get down quickly before the passengers become unconscious. But the captain seems to be struck by a strange paralysis.
All the passengers are using their masks. Shall we descend a little?
The captain does not reply. It's possible that by now he and his crew are suffering from hypoxia, or lack of oxygen to the brain.
The R5 pet?
At this altitude, the oxygen in their blood starts to fall. First, their judgment may become impaired. Eventually, they may lose consciousness.
The R5 pet? Yes, I understand. Captain, the R5 masks have stopped!
At the R5 door, the situation is becoming critical. The oxygen supply has failed. The cabin crew have to give the passengers whiffs of oxygen from a gas bottle. Still, the captain and his crew seem to be drowning in confusion.
I think we better make an emergency descent.
Yes.
Shall we use our mask too? We better. I think we better use the oxygen mask.
Yes.
But they don't put on their masks. No one knows why. It might be indecision or hypoxia beginning to cloud their judgment. At Japan Airlines in Tokyo, flight operations have been alerted to the emergency, but are as mystified as everyone else on the ground. All they know is that over 500 lives are at stake. It's their job to try to diagnose the problem and come up with a solution while the plane is in the air.
This is Japan Air Tokyo. Tokyo Control said they received an emergency call from you.
Listen, right now the R5 door has broken.
Roger. Is the captain returning to Tokyo?
What?
Can you return to Haneda?
Just a moment. We are making an emergency descent. We'll contact you again in a little while. Keep monitoring us, please.
Roger. R5 door. Could it have come off?
If the door has come off, that could mean an explosive decompression of the cabin as the air rushes out. Passengers may have been sucked out kilometers above the ground. But there's a worse possibility. If the door hit the tail of the aircraft, it could have damaged it. The tail keeps the plane stable. Its rudder and elevators make the plane go up and down or side to side. If the tail is damaged, flight operations will be powerless to assist them. In Tokyo, news that a Japan Airlines jumbo jet is in trouble has leaked almost immediately. Japanese television is already breaking into regular programming with live interviews. Someone saw the crippled jet fly overhead.
I knew the plane was in trouble, he is saying. It was swaying back and forth. Then it disappeared in a cloud.
Flight 123's meandering route has put it in range of an American Air Force base at Yokota on the northern outskirts of Tokyo. An American controller there has overheard the conversations between the plane and Tokyo Air Traffic Control. He wants to help to offer Yokota runway for landing.
Japan Air 123, Japan Air 123, Yokota approach. If you hear me, contact Yokota.
The pilots are preoccupied and don't respond. Since they've lost all normal control of the plane, they're now testing the throttles to see what happens. They can make the plane go faster or slower. At least they have speed at their command. As they experiment, they find that if they push the throttles forward when the plane is diving, making the engines go faster, it actually makes the plane come out of the dive and brings the nose up. And if they pull back the throttles when it's climbing, slowing the engines, the nose tips and begins to dive. These actions are the opposite of what a pilot would normally do, but it seems to work, and they begin to flatten out the mad roller coaster ride. Then a second experiment. By applying more thrust to the engines on the left side of the aircraft, they manage to slowly turn the plane right, in the general direction of Tokyo. But then their luck runs out. In the frantic juggling of throttles, the pilots get out of step. It drives the 747 into a frenzy.
Both hands. How about gear down? Gear down! Should put the gear down.
Lowering the landing gear should slow the plane down and make it more stable.
Doesn't work.
Should I lower the alternate?
For safety, 747s employ an electrically run system, separate from the hydraulics, that can lower the landing gear in an emergency. While the engines are turning, they still have electric power. Lowering the landing gear helps stabilize the plane. The drag of the undercarriage has a dampening effect on the pitching motion. But it also destroys the directional control they were getting by applying more power to one side of the aircraft.
Max power.
Close to Mount Fuji, the tallest mountain in Japan, the plane makes an abrupt turn to the right and begins a terrifying dive. The plane is falling at 900 meters a minute, twice the normal rate of descent.
We're going down. Heavy. Is the wheel all the way?
All the way. It's all the way.
Heavy.
Hit the gear down.
Gears down.
There is no need for alarm.
The plane's black box records the flight attendant still trying to calm the passengers.
Japan Air 123, uncontrollable.
And he's gonna hit the mountain.
Tokyo Control, good day to you, sir. This is...
All station except the Japan Air 123. Keep silent until further advised.
Uncontrollable!
Understood. Do you wish to contact...
Stay with us, please. Stay with us.
Just as suddenly, the plane comes out of its dive. They've dropped over 3,000 meters. They're now in amongst towering mountains, but at least there's more oxygen at this altitude. The pilots have been fighting the plane for an intense 22 minutes since the explosion.
This may be hopeless. The hydraulic fluid is all gone. It's uncontrollable. Hey, mountain! Come! The ring! Yes! Right! Good, the mountain! Back forward!
Applying maximum power in order to lift the nose is their only option.
We're gonna hit it! Right! Power! Keep trying!
In their efforts to control the plane, they've allowed the speed to drop too much. To escape the mountain, they need maximum power to generate more speed and more lift.
Gaining speed! Stick with it! Stick with it!
It's pushed all the way!
We're losing altitude! Go lower the nose!
It's lowering!
We're going down!
The passengers grasp the seriousness of the situation. Many of them prepare for the end. But increasing power to avoid the mountains has caused the plane to resume its wayward up and down motions. Having run out of options, the crew is forced to repeat the same futile procedures over and over. They've been fighting the plane for nearly 30 minutes now.
Japan Air 123, Japan Air 123, Yokota.
The air traffic controllers, Japanese and American, are desperate to help, to give Flight 123 any information or reassurance they can.
Request radar vector to Haneda.
Roger, understood. Keep heading 090.
But frustratingly, the plane continues heading off to the northwest, away from both Haneda Airport and Yokota Air Base. Now, with every rise and fall of the plane, they're barely above the mountaintops.
Can you control the aircraft now?
An ominous silence descends on area control.
Japan Air 123, switch radio frequency to 119.7. 119.7, please.
They try changing radio frequency.
If you can, change the frequency to 119.7.
There is no reply.
If you read come up on 119.7, we are all ready.
Japan Air 123, yes, we've selected 119.7. What is our position?
Your position 4-5 miles northwest of Haneda.
In the tensions of the moment, the controller is a bit confused and mistakes the plane's distance from Haneda.
Northwest of Haneda?
How many miles?
Yes, that is correct. On our radar, you're 55 miles northwest. We are ready for your approach at any time. Yokota is also available for landing. Let us know your intentions. Over.
At Haneda Airport, emergency services are being mobilized for the plane, wherever it can touch down.
Yes, roger. They say we're 25 miles west of Kumagaya.
Suddenly, the plane goes into a steep dive, the worst yet.
Stop the flap! Power! Flap up! Flap up! Flap up! Power! Power!
The plane is falling at 5,500 meters a minute.
Raise the nose! Flap up! Flap up! Flap up! Hit up! Raise the nose! Raise the nose! Raise the nose!
Japan Air 123. Japan Air 123. Can you hear me?
Japan Air 123, Japan Air 123, do you read?
Japan Air 123.
Japan Air 123.
Japan Air 123 is gone. At Tokyo Control, they've lost contact with a Japan Airlines jumbo jet full of passengers. An American plane flying in the area has been listening in to the drama of Flight 123 and reports seeing flames in the mountains some 100 kilometers west of Tokyo. One of the C-130 pilots later said that they even guided a rescue helicopter to the scene. And American Marines stood by ready to rappel down to the burning wreckage. But before they could do so, they were ordered to return to base. Rivalry between the various Japanese emergency forces is reported to have caused confusion and delays as the victims of the crash wait for help. During the night, the Japanese Self-Defense Force arrives on the scene. A helicopter flown by Captain Isuzu Omori finds the crash site. The pilot radios in.
Minokayama, Victor 107. I see something. I see flames in about 10 spots over an area of about 300 meters square. Victor 107, Minokayama. Is there any sign of survivors? Victor 107, no signs of survivors. Visibility poor. Too much smoke. Victor 107, can you land to investigate? Not a chance. It's a 45-degree slope down there. Nowhere to put down. And there's fire everywhere.
Seeing no sign of survivors and unwilling to risk a landing at night, Captain Omori returns to base. Meanwhile, a team of rescuers is on its way by road. But since they don't expect to find anyone alive, they spend the night in a village 68 kilometers from the crash site. At the crash site, the passengers of Flight 123 lie dying. The next morning, the last moments of Flight 123 start to become clear. The 747 sliced a path through the trees near the top of Mount Osutaka, one of the mountains north of Mount Fuji. The plane finally hit a ridge several hundred meters further on and exploded. The wreckage and passengers then tumbled down the steep side of the mountain. It's now 14 hours after the crash, and the Japanese Self-Defense Force rescue team arrives at the scene. They are confronted with the worst single aircraft accident in history. They're shocked to find a survivor. It's the off-duty flight attendant, Yumi Ochiai, still hanging on to life. And she is not the only one. Rescuers find a 12-year-old girl wedged in the branches of a tree and airlift her to safety. Incredibly, 2 more passengers are alive, a young mother and her 8-year-old daughter. It's nothing short of a miracle. But how have these 4 survived? The human body is believed to be able to stand a forward deceleration of up to 25 times the force of gravity. But investigators report that from the speed at which the aircraft hit the ground, those at the front of the plane experienced a sudden stop of over 100 Gs. The 4 survivors are hurried to a hospital in Fujioka City. Investigators will soon discover that all 4 of the surviving passengers were seated in the last 7 rows. This is how they survived. In the back of the 747, the impact forces were much less. Sheer luck had protected them from the flying debris. Yumi Ochiai has a broken pelvis and a fractured arm. She tells a disturbing story of what happened as she lay on the mountain, awaiting rescue, and that many more passengers survived the crash.
After the crash, I heard harsh panting and gasping noises from many people. I heard it coming from everywhere, all around me. There was a boy crying, "Mother." I clearly heard a young woman saying, "Come quickly." Suddenly, I heard a boy's voice. "Okay, I'll hang on," he said. It sounded like the voice of a boy of about school age. In the darkness, I could hear the sound of a helicopter. I couldn't see any light, but I could hear the sound, and it was quite near too. "We'll be saved," I thought, and waved frantically. But the helicopter went farther away. "Don't go," I waved desperately. "Help," but it faded. I could no longer hear the voices of the boy or the young woman.
It's clear now that many died in the cold night air, waiting for rescue. The crash of this jumbo jet would normally be a strictly Japanese affair, but it sets aviation alarm bells ringing around the world. Only weeks earlier, an Air India 747 had gone down in the Atlantic, killing 329 people. Now another 520 dead. Was there something wrong with the 747, the world's biggest jet? Could there be some unknown design fault? There were some 600 747s flying worldwide. A problem with the plane would have grave consequences for aviation. Ron Schleid, a top investigator with America's National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, was assigned the case.
So it was a very big concern on our part about whether there was a problem with the 747, an airworthiness problem. And so we had to jump on this very quickly to learn what happened.
At the Washington headquarters of the NTSB, the chairman was extremely concerned of the potential consequences for world aviation. He wrote a personal note to his opposite number in Japan, begging him to invite the NTSB to join the investigation as guests. During the late 70s and 80s, Ron Schleid was involved with many of the major foreign investigations for the NTSB. He's familiar with the sensitivities of working with foreign governments and heads to Tokyo, where he'll meet the rest of his team, representatives from Boeing, the plane's manufacturer, and an engineer from America's Federal Aviation Administration.
When I arrived in Tokyo, the atmosphere in Japan was extremely stressful. The news media were everywhere. There was a tremendous amount of anger.
Once in Japan, Schleid found that the local Japanese police had taken over the investigation and were treating it like a crime scene, diligently observing his team's every move.
Everyone was considered suspicious. Japanese airline personnel, Boeing personnel, were considered suspicious. They weren't even allowed to go to the accident site.
Schleid had to wait for 2 days before the Japanese authorities would allow him to visit the site.
I was able to convince the Japanese to allow us to take Boeing people to the site with the stipulation that the Boeing people stuck very close to us, and we supervised them while they were on scene. They could not operate on their own.
Schleid found that to gain access to the site, the Japanese had quickly constructed helicopter landing pads.
It was an amazing sight to look up at this mountain and see what looked like wreckage from an airplane at a distance, but you could not recognize any part of an airplane. There were scores of helicopters in the air, landing and taking off every couple minutes.
Amidst the wreckage of JAL 123, Schleid found that some families of the victims had managed to scramble to the remote mountain site on foot and build shrines to their loved ones. From above, flowers rained down on the investigators.
I recall these big white, I believe they were Chinook helicopters, flying over, and there were families aboard the helicopters looking at the accident site. They were quite high, and they were dropping flower petals down onto the accident site. The one thing that we found when we got to the accident site was that many of the passengers had a lot of time to think about the end. And they found many, many notes written on pieces of paper, anything they could get their hands on.
My darling wife, life with you has been wonderful. Our children have grown up to be people I am proud of. I never dreamed that the dinner we had last night would be our last together.
Passengers were able to think and realize that they were out of control and maybe going to crash, so they wrote notes to their loved ones and left them in the back of the seats or in their pockets.
But what could have caused this disaster? Neither the heart-rending letters nor the tangled wreckage yet yield any answer to what happened to Flight 123. Still, the main thing the investigators have to go on are the words on the plane's cockpit voice recorder, those of the plane's flight engineer who had said that door R5 was broken. They believe that the door has somehow come off in flight, crashed into the tail, and damaged the plane's flying surfaces, the horizontal stabilizer, which makes the plane go up and down, the rudder, which controls side-to-side movement. But then, a piece of news that destroys that theory totally. The door had not come off. It's found by the investigators amidst the wreckage. The flight engineer was wrong.
Right now the R5 door has broken!
The warning light on his panel led him to believe that the door had failed in flight. But the alarm may well have been set off by a short circuit in the electrical system, caused by the ceiling collapsing in the explosion. It was not a broken door that caused Flight 123 to crash. The investigators would have to look elsewhere.
Stop the flap! Power! 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 Flap up! Flap up! Flap up! Flap up! It's up! Raise the nose! Raise the nose!
Japan Airlines Flight 123 has crashed into Mount Osutaka, taking hundreds of lives. Investigators are worried about a hidden fault in the Boeing 747. They need to find the cause of this crash quickly. A photograph taken by an amateur photographer provides the first clue to the mystery of why the plane became unflyable. There's something odd about the image. Photographic technicians put it on a computer and work hard to enhance the photograph to sharpen up its blurred lines. Finally, they get a clear enough picture. The whole huge tail fin of the airplane is missing. It's what keeps the plane steady. Since most of the plane's hydraulic fluid lines pass through the fin, it starts to make sense why they lost hydraulic pressure and control of the plane. Then, a Japanese Navy ship steaming across the bay south of Tokyo came upon the plane's tail fin floating on the sea. It's at the very spot where the plane had first reported an emergency. Investigators are now certain that the starting point of the accident must have something to do with the tail of the aircraft. They review the known facts. Something had caused the ceiling at the back of the plane to collapse. There had been an explosive decompression of the aircraft. Whatever it was also ripped off the tail fin and the main hydraulic lines with it, making the plane uncontrollable.
This may be hopeless. The hydraulic fluid is all gone.
I'm lost.
Explosion, decompression, loss of the tail fin and hydraulic failure. The investigators need to find out what links these four elements together. Routinely, the investigators begin by looking back into the plane's history. And they make an intriguing discovery. The plane had been in another accident 7 years earlier. The pilot landed the plane with its nose too high. The tail struck the ground and scraped along the runway.
There had been a repair to the rear part of the airplane, including the rear pressured bulkhead. All modern jets, aircraft, when they climb, they have to be pressurized to keep the cabin to a reasonable level for the passengers. So let's take a 747. When the 747 is on the ground, it's actually somewhat oval-shaped. And as it climbs and pressurizes, it becomes more circular.
The rear pressure bulkhead is like a huge metal umbrella lying on its side at the very back of the plane. Its purpose is to stop pressurized air escaping from the cabin out through the tail of the aircraft.
It must be very, very heavy and strong because the forces are tremendous. They're over 8 psi differential, a lot of pressure. The design of 747 aft pressure bulkhead was what they call a dome. And it was designed to take the pressure with a lot less heavy metal, and it's a typical design. It's a pressure dome.
7 years earlier, Japan Airlines called in Boeing to repair the cracked bulkhead. Boeing engineers spliced a new panel into the damaged bulkhead. But at the accident site of Flight 123 in 1985, Ron Schleid stumbled across a piece of wreckage that unraveled the whole mystery. It was a piece of this new panel that had been spliced into the bulkhead.
The repair had in fact not been done correctly. There was only one row of rivets holding that joint together, where there should have been 2 rows of rivets holding the joint together.
To explain to the Japanese investigators what he discovered, Ron Schleid sketched out how the repair should have been made and the mistake that had been made. It was a catastrophic error. The rivets were carrying twice the force they should have been.
One of the FAA engineers there did some calculations for us based on this earlier repair of the bulkhead. And his theory was if the repair wasn't done correctly, for example, if they had not put the rivets in properly and they only had 1 row of rivets holding the bulkhead together versus 2 as designed, that it possibly would fail prematurely.
The FAA engineer calculated that the faulty repair to the bulkhead would fail after 10,000 flights. From the moment the repair was done, it was simply a matter of time. The investigators found that a simple human error had led to this.
Raise the nose!
On a summer's evening in 1985, Japan Air 123 lifts off from Haneda Airport. It's the 12,319th takeoff since the repair of the damaged bulkhead, a repair that the investigators calculated would only hold for 10,000 flights. As the plane climbs to 7,300 meters, the air outside gets thinner and thinner, but the air inside the cabin is pressurized for the passenger's comfort. The difference of pressure between the passenger cabin on one side of the bulkhead and the unpressurized tail on the other stretches the bulkhead and its faulty repair to the breaking point. In a test which duplicated these conditions, cracks began to appear and lengthen around the rivet holes until the bulkhead snaps. In an instant, pressurized air from the cabin blows a hole in it 2 to 3 meters square, bringing down the ceiling around the rear toilets. The highly pressurized air blasts its way into the tail fin of the aircraft and simply blows it off. From that moment on, the plane is doomed. The pilots don't know, and will never know, that most of the tail of their aircraft is missing, blown off into the sea below along with the crucial hydraulic lines that allow them to control the plane. It all finally makes sense. Without the stabilizing influence of the tail, and with the loss of ability to control the rudder and flaps, the pilots cannot control the plane. The giant aircraft now oscillates in a terrifying motion called the phugoid cycle. As the nose drops into a shallow dive, the plane gathers speed, which generates lift. The nose rises again, and the plane begins to climb until it loses speed, tips over, and begins to fall again. The whole cycle repeats itself over and over again. Flight 123 is now plunging up and down in terrifying dives, sometimes several hundred meters at a time.
It really could be considered a miracle that the pilots were able to keep the airplane flying for 30 minutes or more after having lost all the hydraulics in their flight controls. But it kept circling and eventually worked its way into the mountains, and it became impossible for them to land. There was no real alternative for them at all, except to fly as long as they could and hope for some miracle, which never occurred.
Lower the nose. Lower the nose. Yes. Both hands. How about gear down? Gear down! Put the gear down!
To understand what the pilots were up against, 4 hand-picked flight crews were placed in a simulator and confronted with the same situation. Not one of them could land the plane. The pilots of Flight 123 managed to keep their plane in the air for 30 minutes, much of it among high mountains. An amazing feat of flying. Back in Tokyo, as the cause of the JAL accident was identified, Ron Schleid had to break the news to his colleague from Boeing, one of the top designers of the 747. The simple truth was that a single row of rivets had been used when a double row was required.
And when we described our findings to him, you can imagine this Boeing man became very, very upset. Personally was crying because of the fact that his airplane that he designed and then the people that did the repair, because it was Boeing people that designed and did the repair, had made an improper repair that caused the airplane to crash.
The Japanese police wanted to bring criminal charges against Boeing for its part in the tragedy, but the prosecutors decided not to go ahead. Boeing's reputation was damaged, but if they could derive any comfort at all from this tragedy, it was that there was no inherent fault in the 747. The plane continues on to become one of the most successful civil aircraft of all time. However, Japan Airlines, the innocent party, had no such comfort.
After I left the scene and came home, it was my understanding that one of the senior Japanese Airlines maintenance managers actually committed suicide.
The Japanese Airlines president resigned. The bookings slumped. Rumors abounded in Japan that the airline was indeed guilty and that Boeing was just taking the rap for a valuable customer. It's taken years for Japan Airlines to recover from this experience, the worst single plane crash in history. A brand new 767.
Fuel pressure. Why would that be?
How come I have no instruments?
A catastrophic failure at 26,000 feet.
Winnipeg, Air Canada 143. Air Canada 143, go ahead.
Just lost both engines.
Holy cow!
I'm talking to a dead man. How far are we from Gimli?
You're approximately 12 miles from Gimli right now.
I guess I'll just slip it.
The crew is out of options and running out of time. They're at the controls of a 95-ton jet that's quickly falling from the sky.
Mayday, Mayday.
In placid skies over central Canada, Air Canada Flight 143 is just past the halfway mark of its journey from Montreal to Edmonton, Alberta.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your first officer.
The plane is carrying 61 passengers and 8 crew members.
Beautiful day. Clear, temperature of 24 degrees Celsius.
It's July the 23rd, 1983.
There, that's coming along, huh?
Rick Dion is an Air Canada maintenance engineer.
I was going to Edmonton with my wife Pearl and my young son Chris, who was 4 years old, and this was the beginning of a 2-week vacation for us, and we were all pretty excited about going on this new airplane.
Compliment of the captain.
Oh, hey, Rob, thanks.
Whenever you want to come up to the flight deck.
This was my first flight on a modern 767, as the company had just acquired them.
I'll be back in a minute, okay?
I was interested in going to the cockpit to see all this new technology fit in with the work that I did on aircraft.
The captain on this flight is Bob Pearson. He's 48 years old, and he's spent more than 15,000 hours in the air. His first officer is Maurice Quintel, who has more than 7,000 hours of flying time.
Come on in.
Pardon me, gentlemen?
Rick.
I knew Bob Pearson from the small flying club that I attended in St. Lazare, and he was actually one of the local pilots there that used to do some gliding, and he also flew the ultralight lasers.
We had departed heading northwest, a nice clear sunny day in July. We're flight plan at 39,000 feet. There were a few airplanes that flew that high in 1983. And we requested 41,000 feet, which got us further above the jet stream out of the west.
The crew may have accumulated a lot of hours in the air, but very few in this plane. It's Boeing's latest and most advanced wide-body jet, the 767. An army of microprocessors in the belly of the plane automates so many functions that the flight engineer's job has been eliminated. This is one of 4 767s that Air Canada has recently acquired. The plane itself has only 150 hours on it.
Quite a difference here, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Reset on and start here.
The cockpit is different in that all the old instrumentation that we're accustomed to, mostly that was all gone. It was all CRT display, like small TV screens. It was a new high-tech airplane, which involved quite a change for the crew and the maintenance personnel, people handling it.
This was a new aircraft for both the captain and I. At the time, I had 75 hours on that airplane, so everything was new for me.
Pilots and maintenance crews are both still getting to know this airliner.
Well, then we get that same condition.
Captain Pearson explains to Dion how he handled a small problem with the engines on an earlier flight.
Comes back down to low stage, and we just carry on.
You know, that brings up an interesting...
Fuel pressure. Why would that be?
Whoa.
A warning alerts the crew to critically low pressure at one of the plane's fuel pumps.
Something's wrong with the fuel pump.
The 767 has 3 main fuel tanks, 2 in the wings, which are always used, and 1 in the center, only used on long-distance flights. Electric fuel pumps draw fuel from each tank and feed it to the plane's 2 engines. The low-pressure warning could mean that one of the pumps needs maintenance, but it could also be a more serious issue, a lack of fuel to be pumped.
That forward fuel pump. It's just a bloody pump failing, I can tell you that.
Another low fuel pressure warning sounds, this one from another fuel pump on the plane's left side. Pearson's flight management computer tells him he should have plenty of fuel for the remainder of the trip. The 767 also has separate digital fuel gauges, but on this flight those gauges are out of service. The warnings don't make sense.
It got a little more interesting when the second fuel boost pump light came on for that tank, which was the left tank.
This seemed quite abnormal, that 2 pumps would fail in a brand new airplane. We had some kind of a problem that we didn't understand.
What would your assessment of that be? My own personal thoughts? It might be low in the left tank.
I used to be involved with transferring fuel, and I know that when you're trying to empty a tank, it'll start flashing periodically, and then the pump will reprime, and then the light will go out. In this case, it appeared to do exactly the same thing.
Captain Pearson knows that if the left tank is running low, the right tank may be low as well.
Let's head for Winnipeg. Now.
Pearson wants to land as soon as possible in case he is running out of fuel. The crew is still more than 700 miles away from their original destination, Edmonton, Alberta. The nearest major airport is Winnipeg, Manitoba, a mere 120 miles away.
We're showing lots of fuel on board our flight management computer and 3 normal fuel checks, cross-checked with our fuel on our flight plan. So we elected to divert the flight to Winnipeg, where Air Canada has a main maintenance base.
Winnipeg Center.
Air Canada 143.
Air Canada 143, go ahead.
Ron Hewitt has 20 years' experience as a radar controller.
Yes, sir, we have a problem.
We're going to requesting direct Winnipeg.
Air Canada 143 cleared. Take position, direct Winnipeg. You are cleared to maintain 6,000, descent, your discretion.
Send to 6,000 his discretion, and that was it. He didn't tell us what the problem was, and it's none of my business. Give him what he wants, get everybody out of his way. That's about what we do.
Okay, we're out of 410.
Pearson now begins to descend from 41,000 feet.
Oh, man. We're all going out, eh?
The low-pressure warnings are spreading to more and more of the fuel pumps. Quintel instructs the cabin crew to prepare for an emergency landing.
Hello?
Cabin, we think we have problems with our fuel system.
We are diverting to Winnipeg.
All flight attendants to front galley, please.
I hope this is just false warnings. Rick, can you think of anything we haven't done?
No, I can't, Bob.
Okay. We've lost the left engine.
Losing an engine erases any doubt. Flight 143 is in fact running out of fuel.
Okay, checklist. Single engine landing.
Pearson is trained to land a 767 with 1 engine. No one has ever tried landing with none. He scrambles to get his plane down so that he doesn't become the first. With only 1 engine powering Air Canada Flight 143, and with the possibility of the other engine shutting down, the crew prepares the passengers for the worst.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your in-charge flight attendant speaking.
Due to mechanical problems, we'll be preparing for an emergency landing. Please return to your seats and fasten your seat belts. Your crew is fully trained to deal with this situation, and as you may have noticed, some crew members have already started to prepare the aircraft.
I had no idea, like the rest of my crew members, that there was a problem with fuel. I had no idea why we were going to Winnipeg.
Approach and landing. Flaps will be 20.
Right.
Ground flap override.
As they're doing that drill, the right-hand fuel pump low pressure light was flashing as well, much like it did on the left. They were quite busy carrying out the first engine out, not watching the pump lights, which was right at my eyebrow, so I kind of knew that that one there was going to shut down too.
What was that?
Very shortly, we will begin giving you instructions.
How come I have no instruments?
Our beautiful colored engine and flight instrument displays simply went black.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. Please follow our instructions. Refrain from smoking and put your chair back in the upright position. Secure your seatbelt tightly against your hip.
It's exactly what Pearson had feared. He's lost both engines. At 26,500 feet, still 75 miles from the nearest major airport, he's out of fuel.
Winnipeg, Air Canada 143.
Air Canada 143, go ahead.
Just lost both engines.
When both engines shut off, I think he said, "Holy, I'm talking to a dead man."
We were trained in the simulator to handle a single engine failure. We had never practiced, and I don't believe most pilots ever get the chance to practice total engine failures.
143 just lost their engines.
It's highly unlikely that anybody's going to survive this, because I could see them trying to make a turn and spinning in.
An airplane's engines not only provide thrust, they also generate the power needed to manipulate the plane. It would be completely uncontrollable, but modern airliners are like a Swiss Army knife with one last blade hidden away. In the event of a loss of power, they automatically deploy the RAT, or ram air turbine.
It's spring-loaded, and the propeller that drives this small hydraulic pump is about the size of a propeller you would see like on a little Cessna 150. And this arm catapults down into the slipstream. This propeller starts to turn, drives this hydraulic pump, and it gives you basic systems.
I was pretty quiet, flying without motors.
Pearson knows that time is running out. He needs directions to the closest landing strip.
143, this is a Mayday, and we require a vector on to the closest available runway.
143, we copied that all okay.
But the loss of the plane's engines has had an unexpected consequence at air traffic control.
They're gone. They were right here. We've lost him. He's dropped off the screen. I need primary radar. Uh, 143, we've lost your transponder return and are attempting to pick up your target now.
We work on transponder, it's called secondary radar. We take the pilot signal to paint the aircraft.
Commercial jetliners are equipped with a transponder, a device that transmits coded information which air traffic controllers use to determine the plane's location. But when Flight 143 lost its second engine, only a small number of items got backup power. The transponder was not one of them, so the plane disappeared from Hewitt's screen. Flight 143 is somewhere east of Winnipeg, but no one knows exactly where or how far it is from the airport. In spite of its enormous weight, a 767 doesn't plunge from the sky when it loses its engines. Its aerodynamic properties keep it in the air, but slowly coasting to Earth.
and I was trying to figure how many miles we were moving ahead versus how many thousands of feet we were dropping.
But Quintel doesn't have the instruments which provide the information he needs to make that calculation. Since he lost the plane's signal, Hewitt can't give Quintel that information either. Controllers hurriedly work to rig up a way to find the plane.
Just before landing, you will hear the command, brace for landing. Brace immediately and stay braced until the plane comes to a complete stop. There are two ways to brace. One, bend forward. Raise your arms and hands against the seat back.
Bryce Bell is a businessman on his way home to Edmonton.
As soon as they announced that we were making an unscheduled stop in Winnipeg, I immediately wished I hadn't had the 2 drinks that I'd had, because I thought, you're going to have a split second here, and this plane's going to explode in flame, and the decision you make in that split second will depend on how alert you are.
Okay, please put your personal belongings in the seat back pocket.
The response of the passengers when we were doing the emergency briefing was basically alert. They were looking at us. They were paying attention to every word we were saying. I couldn't have had better passengers.
I think that's him. Let's say that's him.
Because their modern equipment can't see Air Canada 143, the controllers switch to old-fashioned radar, which doesn't need a transponder to locate planes.
I got to turn up my true radar, the reflective radar, which is not nearly as good. And we don't use it at all if we can help it.
Okay, I got it. 65 from Winnipeg, 45 from Gimli. 143. We have you at 65 miles from Winnipeg and approximately 45 miles from Gimli.
For the first time since losing power, the pilots know their distance to Winnipeg.
We might make Winnipeg.
Quintel, however, thinks that Gimli is a safer bet. Gimli, Manitoba has a decommissioned Air Force base. It's about 20 miles closer than Winnipeg. As luck would have it, Maurice Quintel trained at Gimli while in the armed forces. He knows it well.
45 miles to Gimli.
That is a long runway.
Is there emergency equipment at Gimli?
Negative emergency equipment at all. Just one runway available, I believe. And no control tower and no information on it.
Pearson must consider the possibility of a crash landing. If he has any chance of making it to Winnipeg, which has full emergency support, he knows he must try for it.
Okay, then we would prefer Winnipeg.
Fine. 143, continue your present heading.
We all reacted very businesslike and say something specifically to the situation, but never would we ever look at each other. I think we were all afraid that we might break down.
Parents were hugging their little kids, and people were busy scribbling away, which I found out afterwards where they were writing their notes to loved ones and their wills and all kinds of things like that. It was pretty nerve-wracking.
143, a question if you have the time.
Okay, go ahead.
Total number of persons on board, please.
The actual number of people on board is 69, but Quintel is overtaxed. He gives a lower number in error.
I have 33 people on board,
including the crew.
Okay.
I have to ask if Soul's on board. I know he's busy. I don't want to ask him questions, but I have to. This thing can go down in the lake or the field. And I remember thinking, great. I know this airplane carries about 300 people. At least it's not 300.
It was about regrets. It was about things I hadn't done in my life. It was about ways I've treated the odd person here or there that I wish I'd treated more gently. It was about how stupid I was at some of the things I used to make big issues out of that are so insignificant when it really comes down to what real reality is about. It was pretty devastating.
And I remember telling a mother with a baby, and I had my daughter Victoria, and telling this woman that it was going to be okay. And I did it. I was so proud of myself that I could be so straight with her and tell her that it was going to be all right and really look at her in the eyes.
Okay, and how far from the field are we now?
You're 35, correction, make that 39 miles from Winnipeg.
Roger.
Now that controllers can see Flight 143 on radar, they can provide Quintel with the information he needs to figure out if he can glide as far as Winnipeg.
Roger, what is your altitude now?
8.5.
8.5.
About 8,500 feet above the ground, Captain Pearson can see his destination. Winnipeg's airport is less than 35 miles away.
We're visual.
But the news from Quintel is not good.
Bob.
Morris was calmly keeping track of our distance by input from Winnipeg Air Traffic Control and our altitude, and calculated our profile and came to the conclusion that we might not make the runway in Winnipeg.
We can last maybe another 20 miles. We're not going to make Winnipeg.
Quintel has calculated that at the rate they're falling, they would hit the ground a full 15 miles short of the runway.
How far are we from Gimli?
You're approximately 12 miles from Gimli right now.
Where is it?
Which way is he moving? On your right. Turn right to a heading of 345. I would say you have 10 miles to fly.
Okay, fine. We're gonna go there.
I'm gonna go check on my family. You guys don't need me up here right now, huh?
No, we're okay.
Don't worry about it. It's okay. They got it under control. Just make sure your seatbelts are tight, all right?
When I went finally to sit down in my seat, this is where I thought, wow, this is it.
Landing gear down.
Roger.
First Officer Quintel lowers the landing gear. Because there's no hydraulic power, Quintel does what's known as a gravity drop, letting the gear's own weight drop and lock it into place. The two main gear are heavy, they fall immediately, and two green lights confirm they've locked. But the nose gear is lighter, it doesn't lock.
We could hear the main gear clearly, falling and locking. I was not aware that the nose gear was not down and locked.
It was sort of a last minute, and if it's something that you cannot control, you don't talk about it, you don't mention it, The main thing was bring the aircraft on the runway.
5 miles to touchdown.
Roger. We have the field in sight.
5 miles from Gimli, Pearson and Quintel finally see a runway they can land on. But there's a problem.
We're too close, huh? It's going to be too steep, too fast.
Yeah, I know.
Pearson is almost at the runway, but he's much too high above it. If he comes down at a normal descent rate, he'll miss the landing strip. But if he comes down steeply, his plane will gather a dangerous amount of speed. He won't be able to stop before the end of the runway.
The normal approach, we have leading edge and trailing edge flaps, which allow us to slow the airplane down and fly at a slower speed safely. We did not have those flaps as they run off the main hydraulic system.
So what are we gonna do? So we discussed, we had two possibilities. One of them was to do a 360-degree turn and lose the excess of altitude. On the other hand, I thought it would take about 3 minutes, and we were already descending at the rate of 2,500 feet a minute.
Only about 3,000 feet above the ground, the plane doesn't have enough altitude to make a full circle. It would hit the ground before making it back to the landing strip. Pearson chooses a second option.
Well, I guess I'll just slip it.
Pearson decides to try a maneuver called a side slip, practically unheard of on commercial airliners, but sometimes used by glider pilots. And Bob Pearson has a lot of experience flying gliders.
I'm just going to slip it down till we're almost down at the runway, and I'll straighten it out. Okay.
Side slipping involves what's known as crossing the controls.
Here we go.
Pearson plans to force the aircraft into a sideways freefall, allowing it to drop quickly without increasing its forward airspeed. Pearson has never actually performed a side slip in a glider, but he's attempting one now in a Boeing 767.
The only way that I could control our speed and our descent profile with the runway was to induce drag in the fuselage by cross-controlling the rudder and the elevators on the tail and the ailerons and the wingtips, and cause the aircraft into a crab configuration. Then I can vary that to increase or decrease our speed or increase or decrease our descent rate.
Pearson controls the plane's descent by using his rudders and ailerons to change the angle of the plane. Crossing the controls involves tipping the wings in one direction, but turning the aircraft in the opposite direction, pushing it sideways into the oncoming air. As Flight 143 begins to drop towards the Earth, Quintel is about to discover something he did not expect. The runway he trained at 15 years ago is no longer a runway. Captain Bob Pearson is out of fuel, out of engines, out of options. If he can't line up with the runway at Gimli, he doesn't get a second chance. Pearson turns the yoke left and pushes the rudders to the right. The plane slips to its left.
We're sitting in the center, which is the heart of the airplane where it starts, so it's pretty solid there. I thought there's a real good chance here that we'll be all right. However, when he put the airplane into a side slip, all that went out the window because I figured, oh, if he hits a wing or something, it starts to catapult and roll, that's not going to work anymore.
The 767 loses altitude quickly, plowing sideways through the air.
When I looked to the left of the aircraft, I was looking directly at the ground because the airplane is angled quite, about maybe 60 degrees of banks. The bank angle was quite high, and the nose of the aircraft was quite high. And it was an awkward moment, and if it was awkward for me, I can imagine for the passengers, it must really have felt odd.
I saw a sand trap from this golf course, and I thought, we're going to crash.
Pearson must maintain a crucial balance. He's got to slow the plane enough to be able to land safely. But if he slows down too much, the airliner could lose its lift and plummet to the ground.
When a pilot is normally landing an airplane, he's maneuvering the flight controls and operating the thrust levers pretty continuously on most landings. And so I was doing the same thing without the thrust levers.
This is where I thought of my daughter Victoria being alone with my husband, and how he was going to cope with our daughter, and how she was going to cope without having a mom.
As they approach, Pearson focuses on his target, the threshold of the runway.
I got tunnel vision like I've never had it before. It was just our speed and our relationship with the threshold of the runway.
But now, only hundreds of feet from the ground, Quintel sees that their troubles are far from over. The Gimli landing strip has been converted into a drag racing strip. Today is Saturday, and it's not just a race day. It's a family day on the Gimli strip. Racing is done for the day. But the airfield is filled with members of the local sports car club, camping out with their families for the weekend. Two children have decided to pedal the length of the runway. They don't hear the plane coming for them. Without engines, it's silent. And one thing the 767 doesn't have is a horn.
Brace! Brace for landing!
The nose hit with quite a bang on the runway. Sounded like a shotgun going off at our feet.
The front landing gear gives out immediately. Pearson brakes hard. 2 tires blow out. The bottom of the right engine scrapes the runway.
I was a robot. There was just no emotion at all.
Finally, Pearson sees what's in their path.
And I looked up and I could see 2 boys on bicycles. They must have been probably about 1,000 feet down the runway from our position when I saw them.
And then at one point, I could see he raised his head, and he's surprised. Here's this big aircraft.
I can still remember the look of terror on their faces. So they were close enough for me to see that.
With no nose gear to steer with, Pearson's only hope of driving the plane left or right is by varying the brake pressure on the 2 main landing gear.
That's when my heart started to pitter-patter a little bit.
The kids panic and try to outrun a plane that's traveling about 200 miles an hour.
I knew I couldn't take the airplane into these boys, and I was going to take it off into the grass on the right side. There were campers along the west side of the runway that I didn't notice until after we'd touched down, and the nose was on the ground, and I can still remember out the left side, people standing by their barbecues.
Dino Calvert is at the track with his friends for a weekend of racing.
One of the gentlemen in the pits suddenly jumped in his car and he took off. And I thought, well, you don't drive like that in the pits usually. And I looked up and all I could see was smoke rising.
Pearson does all he can to stop the plane in time.
Holy crow!
The plane plows into a guardrail installed down the middle of the runway.
Smoke, Bob.
"17 minutes after running out of fuel, Air Canada Flight 143 comes to a final stop on the ground.
Yeah? You okay?
Somebody yelled, Yahoo! Or something, and then people started applauding. And we were so grateful. We made it. When you believe that you're going to crash, you do believe that the airplane is going to break apart, you're going to have fire.
Evacuate! Evacuate!
Evacuate!
All right, let's go. We gotta get up.
Thick smoke is quickly filling the cabin. The crew doesn't take any chances. They want everyone off the plane as quickly as possible.
There was a sense of joy, and then a panic, kind of. It seemed to go in waves, and then a panic saying, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here.
Less than 2 months earlier, an Air Canada DC-9 made a successful emergency landing in Cincinnati, only to burst into flames on the tarmac before all the passengers could get off. 23 people died. The crew and passengers of this flight want to avoid a similar fate.
It took maybe just a few seconds to come up to a full halt on the runway, but the cockpit was full of smoke.
Passenger evacuation checklist.
Passenger checklist.
Fuel shut off.
Off. Cabin depressurized.
Electrics off.
Electrics off.
Checklist complete.
Time to get out of here.
Come on, guys, get some fire extinguishers.
We grabbed the fire extinguishers on our way, and you never go to a fire at a racetrack without having a fire extinguisher with you. And we ran up towards it. The doors open up, and you see the chutes come out, sort of like a spider growing legs.
The plane ended up eventually standing almost what appeared to me to be almost on its nose.
When I opened my door and I saw that the chute was so steep, I thought, oh my goodness, how do I get these passengers to go down?
Due to the nose-down angle of the plane, the two rear slides don't reach the ground. 10 people are slightly injured during the evacuation, most of them coming down the steep rear slides.
I heard on the west radar frequency, he said, one of the 767 says, he's down okay, he's in one piece, and that's when our cheer went up. I said, okay, because all of these people were going to sleep in their own bed that night.
There's still a lot of smoke coming from the plane's nose.
Turned out it was about 6 inches of insulation between the inner and outer skins. From friction, that was starting to burn.
The flight attendants have good news. All 61 passengers have made it off the plane. There's not so much as a single serious injury.
Come on, give me a hand.
Yeah, extinguisher.
Bob Pearson has done what no one has done before. He's safely landed a 767 with no engines, gliding to safety for more than 26,000 feet.
Air Canada Flight 143 glided...
The event makes international headlines immediately. People are already asking how one of the most sophisticated passenger planes in the world could have run out of fuel.
Sliding down emergency chutes.
By the next day, the investigation has already begun. Bill Taylor and Diane Rochelot of Canada's Aviation Safety Bureau are among the first investigators at the scene.
I was a junior mechanical engineering at the time. I had been working for Transport Canada for a year. Going to the field for the first time was very exciting. It was new. It was a major aircraft.
Once we got into the fuel quantity indicating system, I actually left Diane to deal with the specifics of the computer system.
First, Bill Taylor needs to confirm what everyone has been telling him, that the plane is out of fuel. Investigators drained the tanks, collecting less than 17 gallons of fuel. The 767 can hold almost 24,000 gallons. It's like having 5 tablespoons of fuel in a mid-sized car. Taylor next needs to examine the possibility that the fuel leaked out during the flight.
The other checks involve looking for any evidence of fuel having been lost. I even went so far as to go into what they call the dry bay of the aircraft. I'm a bit claustrophobic, so I really wasn't too enthused about going up in there, but I crawled up and had a look around with the flashlight and confirmed that there was no evidence of fuel having been lost in there.
That leaves Taylor with only one conclusion. Flight 143 took off without enough fuel. Now investigators need to find out why.
It's in one piece.
Diane Rochelot begins looking for the answer to that question in the plane's sophisticated electronics bay, located beneath the cabin.
The 767 was a newer type aircraft, and it did have a lot of computerized system, and I guess back in 1982, these were coming onto the market at a fast rate, and they were newer types of electronic system.
Rochelot confirms that a computerized unit, the digital fuel gauge processor, had been malfunctioning on this plane. There was no spare in Montreal, so it couldn't be replaced. Rochelot takes the component for testing.
It was decided early on that the unit, the fuel processing unit, would be taken to the manufacturer, Honeywell, in Indianapolis for testing. And I was tasked with taking the unit. So we went through all the testing procedure. And then at one point, we did discover that there was a malfunction with the unit. During the testing, we went more and more in depth, and we found out that one of the circuit, it's called an inductor coil. It was a very, very small part, and it was encapsulated at manufacture, and encapsulated means it's covered with plastic. You cannot visually see it because it's now covered with plastic, and you can't see the inductor coil itself. But once we took over the plastic case, we could see that the solder joint had not been made properly. which caused a malfunction in the system.
The faulty processor explains why Pearson didn't have fuel gauges for the flight, but doesn't explain why he didn't have enough fuel. The inoperative gauges were clearly flagged. Ground crews wouldn't have relied on them when they were fueling the plane. Investigators confirmed that the ground crew did perform a manual check of the fuel before takeoff.
We just need to know what you did next.
Yeah? We did a manual check of both tanks, and then we pump enough fuel for the trip to Edmonton.
Flight 143 should have taken off with enough fuel for the trip.
Okay, thanks. That helps.
Investigators now have to figure out how one of the world's most advanced jetliners took off with half the fuel necessary for its flight. The investigators know that with its fuel gauges out of service, Flight 143's fuel tanks were checked manually. Then the fuel for the trip to Edmonton was added to the tanks. But before the plane could be given more fuel, a crucial calculation had to be carried out. Pilots need to know the weight of the fuel on their plane. But fuel trucks pump jet fuel by volume. In order for pilots and fuelers to communicate, a simple routine translation between volume and weight has to be made.
You.
Investigators check and double-check that math. The fueling records from the day of the accident provide the answers they've been looking for.
This is a typical fueling record.
But when investigators examine the calculations for Flight 143...
And this is from Flight 143.
They look anything but straightforward. The document clearly shows the amount of fuel in the right and left tanks. But investigators are troubled by two particular numbers. One converts volume to kilograms. The other converts it to pounds.
He shouldn't have been using both. So did you convert to pounds or to kilograms?
To pound? Oh, to kilo. Can I see that again?
Further interviews with the technicians and crew reveal that the events on Flight 143
now I don't know what I did.
Were caused by human error involving poor calculations and ultimately inadequate training.
Okay, fellows, we've finished with the fuel.
The technicians refueling Flight 143 got muddled in their calculations while converting the volume coming out of the fuel truck to the weight of the fuel in the plane's tanks. No one who saw the calculations that day noticed the basic error. In 1983, Canadian ground crews were used to converting the amount of fuel leaving their trucks into pounds. The 767 was the first plane in Air Canada's fleet to have metric fuel gauges. Its fuel should have been measured not in pounds, but in kilograms, which requires a different calculation. Flight 143 needed 22,300 kilograms of fuel for the trip. But pilots and technicians let it leave with 22,300 pounds instead. Because a pound is about half a kilogram, the plane only got half the fuel it required, which explains why Pearson's flight computer told him he had plenty of fuel. He entered the wrong amount of fuel to start with. In the past, the flight engineer calculated the fuel loads. This accident raised an important question. Whose job was it with the two-man crew?
Better training is definitely an issue in an incident such as that. If everyone is trained and the lines are drawn as to who's responsible for what, then there's no ambiguity on it. People know what they're responsible for. In this case, it was sort of open-ended. We weren't aware who was responsible for the final say on this field stuff.
A subsequent inquiry found that none of those involved that day was trained in metric calculations. Not the ground technicians, not the pilots.
I had not received any, neither of us had received any training at all on doing these calculations.
The computer that had replaced the 767's flight engineer was broken, and no one knew who should be doing its job. Air Canada 143 was essentially down a man.
And the goal is to prevent a recurrence of this particular event. And also, we also find out other systems that might have been either at fault or maybe they could cause a problem in the future, and you do try to prevent recurrence.
All right.
It took a string of mechanical and human failures for Flight 143 to run out of fuel. But another failure that day may have saved some lives. If the plane's nose gear had not collapsed, it would have taken Pearson much longer to stop. The plane could have slid into the people who were at the strip that day, which would have had catastrophic results. There could have been more injuries or even loss of life. Pearson and Quintel were partly blamed for their roles in the incident. A government inquiry recommended that Air Canada re-evaluate the training of flight crews and ground technicians in metric fuel conversions. It also recommended that the airline keep more spare parts, such as fuel gauge processors. Rick Dion retired in 2003 after a long career as Air Canada's coordinator of maintenance control. First Officer Maurice Quintel was promoted to captain in 1989. Captain Bob Pearson went on to fly 10 more years for Air Canada, his experience at Gimli shaping the rest of his career as a commercial pilot.
This experience affected me mostly by making me more relaxed as a pilot, giving me the feeling that as much as I've trained for all those years, that there's always that question about how you're going to perform when the chips are down, and I now have the feeling that no matter what, as long as an aircraft stayed together, I would get it safely back on the ground. And so it's been a relaxing experience.
It's the knowledge that you know under stress you can perform. Before that, you don't know. You just hope you will, and you train for it, but you never know.
With the things that they had to deal with was magnificent. I think that got proven in the simulator in Vancouver. They tried out this same circumstances with several crews, and they all crashed.
Probably the most important thing that came out of it was a realization that when something new is introduced, special attention and training needs to be accomplished for people to be aware what they're dealing with.
When we had landed and the airplane was all in one piece, I thought, wow, I got another chance to fly again.
Because of a tragedy like that, once you take your deck of cards and fire it in the air, you're truly free. And I guess from that point of view, Gimli could, I find it very difficult to say, but Gimli was maybe almost the best thing that ever happened to me, next to meeting my wonderful wife and marrying her.
2 days after the landing at Gimli, Air Canada's 767 was back in the air on its way to Winnipeg for repairs. A quarter century later, that same plane is still in service, and it still carries the nickname that Bob Pearson earned it, the Gimli Glider. It's a few days before Christmas. The residents of a small Scottish town prepare for the holidays. Danger is fast approaching.
The street was on fire, lawns were on fire, and houses were on fire.
I had never seen anything like that.
Christmas is just going to be remembered for all the wrong reasons.
A devastating plane crash shatters a village and captures the attention of the world.
It was one of the most significant terrorist attacks in history.
The mystery is finally cracked by a piece of debris smaller than a fingertip. October the 26th, 1988, near Düsseldorf. For weeks, German police have been following a group of suspected terrorists around the ancient town of Neuss. Today, they'll make their move.
Jetzt! BK! BK!
In the trunk of their car, police make an unusual discovery.
Berühren Sie es nicht.
Police raid apartments used by the two men. They find a number of blank passports and a small arsenal of weapons. When police closely examine the radio recovered from their car, they find it's wired with explosives.
Those devices used a combination of an improvised barometric device and a timer, a short delay timer. All these devices were, in fact, supposed to go onto an aircraft.
A barometric timer is set off by changes in altitude. It's triggered when it reaches a certain height. Since that guarantees a plane will be in the air when the bomb goes off, it's a favorite device for those targeting passenger jets. The two men arrested in Germany work for a well-known terrorist organization, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine.
Leader of the PFLP-GC, Ahmed Jibril, made a speech in Libya in 1986, and one of the things he said was that until there's peace in the Middle East, there would be no safety for anyone traveling on an American or an Israeli airliner.
Hafez Dalkamouni is shipping weapons to Syria and Lebanon. Marwan Krishat is a notorious bomb maker, responsible for bringing down at least one passenger jet. It's just a couple of months until the busy Christmas travel season. With the two men under arrest, German police have made commercial aviation a little safer. Two months later, Pan Am Flight 103 is on its way from London to New York. The jet has just taken off from Heathrow Airport. There are 259 people on board. Most of the passengers are American. Charles McKee actually works for the US government. Khalid Jafar lives in Detroit and is returning home from a trip to Lebanon and Germany. The first part of the trip to the United States takes the plane northwest up over Scotland. The so-called Daventry departure is one of 6 preset routes that jets follow on their way out of Heathrow. Lockerbie is one of several small towns the plane will pass over. Tucked away in the Scottish lowlands, residents are barely aware that they live below a busy aerial highway. Pan Am calls this 747 Clipper Made of the Seas. As it levels off at 31,000 feet, the crew gets in touch with air traffic control.
Good evening, Scottish. Clipper 103, we are level at 310.
103, you are identified.
Captain James Macquarie is 55 years old. Like many passengers on this pre-holiday flight, he's heading home. Five miles below, the people of Lockerbie prepare for Christmas. Michael Gordon is chatting with a friend when a strange rumbling noise fills his house.
Hang on, there's something odd outside here.
The weather that night was a bit wild. There was a fairly strong westerly wind, and I could hear it hitting the window in front of me. From my window I can see Lockerbie because my house sits up on the hill. And I heard this noise which was above the noise of the wind, and the noise sounded like thunder. And the noise got louder and louder. And I could hear the noise then got to the stage of being similar to a jet fighter. And at that time, we had a lot of military aircraft passing through the area. However, I saw dark objects, dark things falling from the sky. Against the lights of Lockerbie, I could see these black objects coming down. And then, from my right, quite high on my right, I could see a long, thin, black object which had a fire on the upper surface coming in. And it was making its way towards Lockerbie. When it hit, there was the most horrendous explosion, and I could hear the tiles on the roof of my house lifting.
Hello? Hello?
When the explosion took place, the telephone line stopped functioning.
Lockerbie is burning. Enormous flames reach into the night sky. Michael Gordon races to the neighborhood that is hardest hit.
The street was on fire, the lawns were on fire, and houses were on fire. And it was difficult to go without finding my trousers burning and my shoes burning. You had to jump about quite a bit because everything was on fire. But I remember at that point finding an airline ticket, and it was perfectly intact. There's no damage by fire or fuel or contamination of any sort. And the airline ticket said London Heathrow to JFK.
Somehow, Pan Am Flight 103 has fallen from the sky and smashed into Lockerbie, Scotland. In the daylight, the full horror of the crash of Pan Am Flight 103 is obvious. Several houses on the ground have simply vanished, vaporized when the plane smashed into them. An enormous crater is torn through the southern edge of the town. 1,500 tons of rock and earth have been blasted out of the ground. 11 people from Lockerbie are dead, along with all 259 people who were on board.
As far as I know, I've lost my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and their house is just a 30-foot crater.
In the ruins of their homes, they search for the bodies of the aircraft's passengers. Such a catastrophe, so sudden, so great a shock for a quiet town.
It looked like a scene out of hell. This whole road was ablaze.
Didn't know what it was, and then we rushed outside and just all this debris coming down.
Air crash investigators have arrived in Lockerbie within hours of the crash. Mick Charles is the lead inspector for the British Air Accidents Investigation Branch, the AAIB.
One of the first sites we went to was the site of the crater that was still smelling very much of aviation fuel for a start, and scattered all around were bits of debris and in some cases human tissue as well.
Charles quickly gathers his team to begin looking for clues.
It was all heaving, it was happening, there were loads of people, and it was to some extent chaos.
You'll be organised into groups, headed by an AAIB inspector. Does anyone have any questions? The sooner we start, the better.
More than 1,000 police officers and 600 members of the military pour into Lockerbie.
You always have this sense of wanting to get to grips with what it is. It was quite clear that whatever it was colossal.
Any debris that's found is put into clear plastic bags and left to be collected later. Dark bags are used to store human remains. It's just days before Christmas, but the holiday spirit has been shattered.
At the start of the investigation, what we were doing was finding out which bits of the aeroplane were where, actually finding all the aeroplane.
The sheer scale of the disaster is difficult to comprehend.
Chris, the RAF have offered us a helicopter. Can we use it?
Absolutely.
With so much wreckage being found, investigators need to get a bird's-eye view and locate the largest fields of debris.
The maps of that area were a very short supply, and we ran out of them very quickly, so we had to use black and white photocopies initially.
Investigators bring local police officer Michael Gordon with them to help in the search.
The intention was for me to be able to identify geographical landmarks and identify parts of the aircraft.
They soon get a better sense of their enormous task.
When we were in the helicopter, we could see that the wreckage came out in a cone shape, emanating from Lockerbie, and the cone shape got wider and wider the further from Lockerbie.
The principal feature that I was looking for was to try to establish some pattern of the wreckage which would basically help me direct the ground investigators.
They're shocked by what they find. Pieces of the plane are scattered over an area larger than all of London. More than 2,000 square kilometers. It quickly becomes clear that Pan Am 103 was coming apart long before it hit the ground.
Normally, you're seeing a fairly contained accident site. In Lockerbie, it was nothing like that, because initially the police had identified half a dozen discrete sites.
A 747 is made up of more than 6 million parts. In the mangled remains of the jet, investigators need to find the one that will tell them what happened. The plane's cockpit is eerie proof that Pan Am Flight 103 broke apart in mid-air. Severed from the rest of the plane, it's 4 kilometers east of the city.
When looking at the cockpit, I was looking at the roof of it, and the windows were intact. The actual nose part had cracked open, but it was as if it had been chopped off just aft of the cabin, and you could walk round the back and look into the cabin section from the back.
Inside the cockpit, investigators note the positions of various switches and controls. They find the autopilot is on and the oxygen masks are still stowed.
This is a fairly standard procedure which we would do in any such investigation. The end result was that there was nothing at all untoward found in the cockpit. Everything was consistent with cruising flight.
Soon, investigators discover why the damage to Lockerbie was so devastating.
The main wreckage which fell on the town of Lockerbie was the wing, which is basically both the left and right wing, complete with the structure in the middle.
Investigators estimate that the plane was loaded down with 90,000 kilograms of fuel.
$150 tons, descending essentially vertically at up to about 500 knots speed, and there's an awful lot of energy in that. And that's what created the crater.
To find the cause of the crash, however, investigators will have to look elsewhere. They need to examine wreckage found south of Lockerbie. These pieces would have come off at the beginning of the disaster. While the painstaking work of collecting evidence continues, investigators comb through maintenance records. Those records raise concerns with the plane's age. Clipper made of the seas was the 15th 747 ever built by Boeing.
This was one of the older Boeing 747s. It was built in 1970, so it was 18 years old and had got something like 75,000 flying hours.
Perhaps some critical part of the plane had given way as it flew over Lockerbie.
The two obvious possibilities were that it was a straightforward structural failure, or it was possibly the result of sabotage.
McCharles, Tom Thurman, FBI.
Good to meet you, Tom. I was expecting you.
While the investigators are searching for possible answers in the history of the plane, the second possibility, sabotage, is also being pursued.
We were there to provide technical expertise to the Scottish investigators into explosives and explosive damage, and that the telltale sign that it could be a bomb.
Just 3.5 years before Lockerbie, a bomb had brought down an Air India jet just off the Irish coast. In that case, the plane and vital clues sunk deep to the bottom of the sea. But the wreckage of the Pan Am flight litters the Scottish lowlands. If it was a bomb, there's a chance that important evidence can be found.
What kind of logistical effort is it going to take to find everything, and I mean everything, and bring it back to a location to be able to look at it and come to some conclusion? With the fragments that we found on the ground, we were picking those up. We were looking for blast damage on these pieces of metal. But until we found something that said it was a bomb, physical evidence, it was an accident.
We were very mindful of the fact that there was plenty of reports in the media about it being a terrorist act. It's a question of what evidence you find and which direction to take the investigation.
In the first 24 hours, 4 separate groups have claimed responsibility for bombing the jet.
The guardians of the Islamic Revolution are undertaking this heroic execution in revenge for the blowing of the Iranian airplane by America.
Dick Marquise is an expert on international terrorism working for the American FBI.
A number of organizations either claim credit for or were given credit, including groups from Iran and Palestinian groups, and one Irish group also claimed responsibility for it.
6 months earlier, the US Navy shot down an Iranian passenger jet. 290 people were killed. The American government claims it was an accident, but Iran has vowed revenge. Other threats had been made in the weeks before the crash. The American embassy in Helsinki received an anonymous warning that a bomb would soon be put on a Pan Am flight leaving from Frankfurt. Officials eventually discounted the threat, but a notice was posted in American embassies. Many of the passengers who boarded Flight 103 had come from Frankfurt on a connecting flight.
Right, excellent work, everyone.
Then, on Christmas Eve, just 3 days after the crash of the plane, the investigation gets an enormous break.
Everyone clear on what they need to do this evening? Terrific. Tom, can I see you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You'd like to put your gloves on, I think, for this.
Mick Charles had a bag and had a piece of metal in the bag.
What is it?
We think it's a piece of luggage rail. It helps guide the cargo containers into place.
Inspectors in the field discovered items which they recognized as being not part of a normal failure sequence that you would expect if it had been a structural failure.
Nick, this has been very near an explosion.
That's what we thought as well.
Small marks have been made on the metal. Craters that are the telltale signs of a bomb.
The hot gases of the combustion process of the explosion hits a piece of particularly metal, and it puts pits in it like you would take a blowtorch. Take a blowtorch and you have a piece of metal and you just barely touch the piece of metal, it'll make a little hole down into the metal.
It's the first piece of wreckage from outside the town of Lockerbie to show any signs of being damaged by fire.
Where did you find it?
I'll take you out in the morning.
The Scottish countryside is about to become the largest crime scene in the world. It's Christmas Day, 1988. But in Lockerbie, Scotland, people are still reeling from a devastating plane crash.
Christmas is just going to be remembered for all the wrong reasons.
It's just tragic for everybody. I'll never believe in God again.
For air crash investigators, December the 25th is treated like any other day at work.
That was, in my mind, the most distinguishing characteristic of Lockerbie. And although it was over Christmas, you just stay there and you do what you have to do.
Investigators converge on a farmer's field outside of the town.
Over here! Keep yelling! We can't see you!
The weather had turned horrible. Foggy, kind of misting rain. You couldn't see 10 feet in front of you. And there was debris literally all over the place.
Another piece of the baggage compartment rail has been found.
That looks like the piece that you showed me last night. About 20 inches is just gone.
And lo and behold, that was the other piece of the skid rail that was literally sticking in the ground. We made some photographs. You know, it was a Christmas present that we could go out there to this farm and find the other piece of metal that had been blown off. No, we were not fascinated. We were pumped.
This piece also has pits and craters in it, indications that it was close to an explosion. The pieces of wreckage are part of the southern debris field, and near the beginning of it. The placement suggests they were some of the first parts to break off the plane.
We were very suspicious that it was a bomb which had caused this destruction, but we were not prepared to say anything until we'd had those details confirmed by the forensic experts.
A British forensics lab has made the critical link. Traces of 2 chemicals used to make plastic explosive are found on the debris recovered near Lockerbie. On December the 28th, just 7 days after the crash, investigators have their proof and announce it to the world.
It has been established that 2 parts of the metal luggage pallet's framework show conclusive evidence of a detonating high explosive.
The crash of Pan Am Flight 103 is now officially a crime.
Our mandate with regard to Lockerbie was find out who did it and prove it. Because what we wanted to do is bring someone to justice and make them answer for killing 270 people.
With terrorism now the official cause, rumors start to fly. Speculation eventually focuses on two passengers. Charles McKee works for the US Department of Defense.
Charles McGee was returning from the Middle East, where he was working trying to free hostages that had been taken in the Middle East during the mid-1980s.
The hostages McKee was trying to release were being held in Lebanon. In 1988, a civil war was tearing that country apart. Americans were seen as useful bargaining chips.
There was speculation in the media that Charles McKee may have been targeted by terrorists because of the work he was doing.
McKee isn't the only passenger who captures the attention of the media. Khalid Jafar was 20 years old and was returning home to the US after a trip to Lebanon and Germany.
Perhaps a bomb was carried on board an aircraft by someone who may have had a Middle Eastern-sounding name. Jafar was examined as a potential suspect.
The story makes it as far as the US Congress, but no proof can be found that Jafar was involved or that McKee was the intended target.
We looked at every single passenger on the plane to see if, in fact, someone could have given them a bomb. The evidence proved that not to be the case.
In Lockerbie, investigators from the AAIB continue to sort through the tons of tangled metal.
We could, I suppose in theory, have just stopped, but we thought, we know it's a bomb, we have all of the wreckage over land, it's an ideal opportunity to recover it all and to understand it properly. We knew it was a small bomb, but we didn't understand the explosive processes.
Investigators are particularly interested in the hull of the aircraft. They move pieces of it to a military hangar just outside of town.
It was a 5-acre shed which was long enough that we could plan to lay the fuselage out, opened up like a clamshell, using the bottom center line of the aircraft as our sort of core line.
The fuselage of an airplane is bolted to a series of frames, and each frame is numbered based on how far it is from the front of the aircraft.
Before we laid out the wreckage two-dimensionally, we put lines and tapes on the floor to give us a grid, and this grid related to the geometry of the aeroplane.
They begin to reassemble it, like an enormous jigsaw puzzle.
A lot of the structure bears characteristic shapes that you can say immediately, this looks like a door frame. A lot of stuff, it has unique part numbers, which can help you identify small and fairly, what you would call unidentifiable bits.
As the work continues, more pieces of the plane are found that show telltale blast damage.
Right, the location is 817204.
When they gather the pieces that are near the front of the plane, investigators make a chilling discovery. This is where the bomb had started ripping the plane apart.
It became apparent that there was an area of the aircraft in which the damage was really quite different from the rest.
The fuselage in this section isn't torn, but blasted to pieces.
The fuselage structure in the area of the explosion was blackened and sooted. The fractures were very rapid and jagged, unlike normal tearing fractures of skin.
Frame 700 runs right round here.
Not only do investigators now know it was a bomb, they know where it blasted through the fuselage of the plane. Just outside of the forward luggage compartment. Peter Claydon is responsible for reassembling the cargo containers that were directly behind the shatter zone.
The main goal I had was to identify the baggage container that contained the device. We had maybe 20 baggage containers of a similar construction. So it's like having 20 jigsaw puzzles all mixed up.
The investigators concentrate on the cargo containers that were found in the southern debris field, wreckage that was ejected shortly after the explosion.
We concluded that there were only two on the aircraft, one made of aluminium, one made of fiberglass, and they had been adjacent to each other on the aircraft, and they were the only two that exhibited evidence of an improvised explosive device having detonated.
The metal container, AVE 4041, is of particular interest. It was resting directly behind frame 700, where the blast damage is the worst.
The damage caused to the metal container was quite severe. The damage to the adjacent fiberglass container, I think you might call it collateral damage.
Investigators create a simple framework and attach the pieces of the real cargo container to it. As they do, it becomes clear. AVE 4041 carried the bomb that brought the plane down. Closely examining damage to the floor and the side of the container, investigators are also able to pinpoint the height of the bomb, where it was in the container when it exploded.
What that said to me was that the device was probably in a suitcase, and that suitcase was probably not on the floor of the container. It looked like it was one level up.
According to luggage records, it means that the bag containing the bomb had come from a connecting flight. While investigators are assembling a piece of the metal container, they discover a fragment of wreckage that doesn't belong.
When I was looking at it, I saw a little piece of debris trapped in one of the folds. So gently flexing this apart, it fell out. When I looked at it, I could see it was a fragment of a printed circuit board, an electronic circuit board.
Can you bring me a camera and an evidence bag, please? Let's get this to the lab.
I didn't know whether it was a bomb part of the airplane really or what. It could have been somebody's shaver, for all I know.
Eventually, forensic experts in Britain determined that the circuit board was a piece of a specific brand of radio. News of the discovery makes its way to Washington. It reaches Tom Thurman, who's returned to his office there.
And lo and behold, an identification was made into a Toshiba SF-16 radio. And ironically enough, the name on the side of that radio, just as a brand name, I guess, was called a bomb beat radio.
The radio cassette player had hidden the bomb. It's very similar to the one that was recovered by German police when they cracked the Palestinian terrorist cell 2 months before the bombing. Had German police somehow missed something? Had a bomb made here been used on the Pan Am flight?
When the bombing happened, one of the initial suspects certainly was the PFL-PGC cell in Germany. The intelligence told us that the PFL-PGC was probably responsible for this.
49 passengers who eventually boarded the Pan Am flight started their journey in the German city of Frankfurt. Their bags were placed onto Flight 103 in London. But the airline did not ensure the passengers who checked in the bags actually got onto the plane. Perhaps a bomb made in Germany had slipped through the cracks at Heathrow while the terrorist walked away.
We had to then, if that was the case, prove it.
As the investigation continues, there's a puzzling discovery. While made by the same company, the cassette player used in the Lockerbie bombing is slightly different from the one that was seized in Germany.
Both were contained into Toshiba radios, but one was a one-speaker model, and the one that blew up the Lockerbie plane was a two-speaker, more updated model radio.
The difference in the model of radio being used raises doubts. Perhaps the terrorists in Germany are not responsible.
You can look at the way that a device is put together and say, hey, I know who put this together because I've seen this before, and this is the way that this bomb builder puts a bomb together. To call it a bomber's signature.
Law enforcement officials need more clues to figure out who had built the bomb. Perhaps the suitcase it was packed in can provide those clues. Studying small pieces of wreckage, British forensic experts find that the suitcase was a hard-sided Samsonite 4000. Samsonite made only a few thousand of these suitcases and sold all of them in the Middle East. Several pieces of clothing have also been identified that were very close to the explosion, likely in the suitcase that concealed the bomb. Most of these clothes were made by a single manufacturer and were only sold on the tiny island of Malta.
So Malta became the focus of the investigation because of the manufacture and eventually distribution of some of the clothing that was found at Lockerbie.
Investigators find the shop in Malta where the clothes were sold. The owner gives them another clue.
The key thing that he told us was the person had a Libyan accent, something we didn't really have evidence yet that tied Libya to the bombing.
It was just 2 weeks before the attack on the Pan Am flight. In 1988, Libya was reeling from a number of confrontations with the American military. Economic sanctions had been imposed. The country was isolated, and its leader, Muammar Gaddafi, aggressively anti-American. Perhaps the bombing of the Pan Am flight was an attack by Libya against the United States. Pouring through baggage records for the Pan Am flight, police discover one piece of luggage that had been carried from Malta to Frankfurt earlier that day. Bag number B8849 had then been sent through to Britain's Heathrow Airport. Once there, it was placed on the second level of cargo container AVE 4041. It was the Samsonite case investigators now know carried the bomb. More than a year after the crash, a new discovery in Lockerbie helped simplify the confusing series of clues. Forensic experts discover another circuit board from among the clothes that came from Malta.
It doesn't come from that circuit board that was in the SF-16 radio. And this circuit board is half the size of your thumbnail.
A photo of the circuit board is sent to Tom Thurman. He believes it could be a piece of the timer from the bomb.
I spent months literally looking through all of the files of the FBI on other examinations that we had conducted over many, many, many years.
The FBI has photos of timers used to detonate bombs around the world. But Thurman can't find any that match the piece found at Lockerbie.
Nope. Next.
After a period, I ran out of leads. And at that point, said, okay, now we need to go outside the physical FBI laboratory.
Thurman eventually takes the photo of the circuit to the Central Intelligence Agency.
I called a contact of mine and I said, I need to bring something over for you to look at.
Sifting through reports on various bombings, Thurman finds a match.
Wait a second. That could be the same. Do you have this timer?
When Thurman closely examines the timer captured by the CIA, he's stunned.
Within a few minutes, literally, I started getting cold chills. And right now, as I talk about it, cold chills start on me, because I can still see that moment so vividly in my mind that I'm looking at circuit track that's just like what I'm seeing in the photograph.
This is what we're looking for.
The timer the CIA has was seized in Africa a few years earlier. 2 Libyan men were trying to get it and several pounds of explosives past airport security. It's identical to the timer used to bring down Flight 103 and wouldn't be set off by changes in pressure like the barometric switch discovered in Germany. This device was set to go off at a certain time, not at a given altitude.
This is the timer. This is a long delay timer that brought down that aircraft. But now we want to know, okay, where'd this come from?
The Lockerbie bomb used a different timer and a different radio than the bomb found in Germany. Someone else was behind the destruction of the jet.
This was not made in somebody's home laboratory. This was a extremely professionally made timer.
While the criminal investigation becomes murkier, the accident investigation is becoming increasingly clear. The investigation eventually moves from Scotland to Farnborough, England. Well known for its aeronautics industry, the town is home to the AAIB. Several months after the crash of Pan Am Flight 103, investigators launch a massive endeavor. They begin to rebuild a 20-meter section of the fuselage from the ruined jet. They hoped that it would give them information their two-dimensional reconstruction couldn't. They can see that the explosion tore a 1.5 by 5 meter hole in the side of the plane. Chris Prothero is a senior inspector of air accidents at the AAIB.
What was very difficult to understand was the fact that this area of direct damage was effectively a pinprick in relation to the size of the aircraft as a whole, and it was very difficult to understand how this pinprick of damage had resulted in such a comprehensive destruction of the aircraft.
The bomb that brought the plane down had less than 0.5 kilogram of explosive. Yet its destructive power was immense. Investigators want to learn more about how shock waves behave inside a jet.
It's rather like a freeze frame on a video footage. If you can capture that point as the thing is coming apart, it tells you a great deal about the way it's coming apart.
What they discover is that the initial blast wave wasn't the only one to damage the plane. A large section of the ceiling of the aircraft has been pushed up with so much force that the rivets connecting it to the plane's frame popped. It wasn't torn apart, but blasted by a shockwave.
The other features that the 3D reconstruction allowed us to identify were areas of remote pressure damage on the crown skin and other areas where explosive shock had been channeled through the internal spaces in the aircraft.
The inside of a jet acts like an echo chamber, bouncing the shockwaves of the bomb around. They gather strength until they encounter a weak spot in the skin. When they do, they blast through. The work in Farnborough is powerful proof of how destructive even a small bomb can be. And how vital it is to track the bombers down. Almost 2 years after the Lockerbie disaster, the criminal trail of evidence brings investigators to Zurich. The timer that detonated the bomb is traced to a Swiss company called Mebo. One of the owners of the company admits to building it.
The timer was given to the Libyan government. A total of 20 of them were made, all delivered to Libyan officials.
Early in the investigation, focus was directed at the Palestinian terrorist group in Germany. Now there's growing proof that they had nothing to do with the downing of Flight 103.
There were any number of suspects, and it wasn't until we kept putting everything in one pile, and the pile kept stacking up, and it spelled Libya.
Criminal investigators have linked the timer that detonated the bomb to Libya. They know that a Libyan bought the clothes that were in the suitcase. And they know that Libya has a recent history of military confrontation with America. All they need now is the bomber himself. In 1999, they finally have him. At the time of the disaster, Abdel al-Megrahi was an intelligence officer for the Libyan government. He's arrested and charged.
He was a high-ranking Libyan official. He certainly could have access to whatever he wanted. Our investigation determined that Megrahi also had a front company at Mibo. He had been there many times. They certainly knew each other. When you start to see all the connections and these things just start fitting together, it made it easier to accept our evidence.
In 2001, Scottish judges sentenced him to life for the murder of 270 people. 2 years later, the government of Libya officially accepts responsibility for the bombing and pays $2.7 billion to the families involved. Anger is also aimed at Pan Am for the role it played in the disaster. A Scottish inquiry points a finger at the company. The passenger who checked the bomb onto Flight 103 did not get on board. It's a fact that Pan Am could have discovered had it been following proper procedures.
One of the things we discovered when we looked into the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 was that there were several bags on that plane that did not correspond to passengers.
One of the changes that came about as a result of the Air India bombing was that airlines were forced to make sure no bag was put on a plane without a passenger accompanying it. It's called passenger baggage reconciliation. Without proper notification, Pan Am had stopped matching passengers and baggage at Heathrow Airport.
So that rule that said that all passengers and luggage have to be matched was not followed.
The company was eventually found guilty of willful misconduct. After the crash and the court ruling, Pan Am declared bankruptcy. 20 years after the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103, its shattered fuselage still stands in Farnborough, England. Those pieces may soon be used to train investigators here and around the world. A critical aid in case terrorists strike again.
The enduring feeling I have as a result of Lockerbie is the tremendous level of cooperation we had from all the agencies. And considering that there were about 2,500 people with the military, the police, and so on involved in this, I think that's a great tribute.
Lockerbie was a rare occasion that we felt honored to be a part of, to help make this happen. You know, we played small roles, but everybody played small roles to make big contributions to an overall success.
In the town of Lockerbie, there's little evidence today of the horror that exploded from the sky 20 years ago. In a small church, near where the dying plane's cockpit landed, is a stark reminder of the toll of terror and the importance of bringing the guilty to justice.
takeoff checklist complete.
US Airways Flight 1549 has just left New York's LaGuardia Airport.
Birds.
And that fast, we were just on top of them.
My aircraft.
Your aircraft.
Both of the plane's engines have stopped working.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Cactus 1549.
The plane is falling from the sky. There are only a few seconds to decide what to do.
If we can get it for you, want to try and land on runway 13.
We're unable.
155 lives depend on the pilots making the right call.
Hey, Cactus 1549, you can land runway 1 at Peterborough.
Can't do it.
With a bad option on the right and a worse one on the left, the crew decides to put their Airbus on the runway that's dead ahead.
We're going to be in the Hudson.
Mayday, mayday.
New York's LaGuardia Airport, mid-afternoon.
Please take a moment to listen to this important...
US Airways Flight 1549 is a short hop from New York City to Charlotte, North Carolina.
At least it will be a little warmer in Charlotte.
Your seat serves as a flotation device.
Together in the cockpit today are Captain Chesley Sullenberger, 57.
Clear to push.
And First Officer Jeffrey Skiles, 49.
We were late because the weather was bad earlier, but by this point, the weather had cleared off for our departure, and it was just puffy clouds.
28 brakes released.
Spot 28 for Cactus 1549.
150 passengers are on board the European-made Airbus A320. Businessman Clay Presley is on his way home to Charlotte.
I arrived at the airport at LaGuardia. It was very cold. It had been snowing a little bit that day, and we had a storm coming in, so we wanted to make sure we made that flight and weren't hung up or delayed on some later flights.
The crew flew in an hour earlier from Charlotte, with Sullenberger at the controls.
Your brakes, your aircraft.
First Officer Skiles will be flying the plane back to Charlotte.
My aircraft.
It's a common sharing of piloting duties.
Cactus 1549, runway 4, clear for takeoff.
Cactus 1549, clear for takeoff.
This trip marks the final leg of a 4-day sequence of flights for both men.
We made our standard call-outs. It was just a normal takeoff, normal procedures on the climb out. There was absolutely nothing at all to indicate that this would be any different than any other takeoff in my entire career.
But by the end of the day, they'll be the most famous crew on the planet.
Gear up, please.
Gear up.
Patrick Harton is one of the controllers handling traffic out of LaGuardia today. He has one of the most stressful jobs in the world.
When I sit down in front of a radar, I'm responsible for every person on every airplane under my control. And I take that responsibility very seriously.
Cactus 1549, New York departure, radar contact. Climb and maintain 15,000.
The flight will climb northeast out of LaGuardia, and then begin a slow turn south towards Charlotte.
I think I had about 3 or 4 airplanes on my frequency at that time. And it was just a normal departure. You know, it was just another flight that I've handled a million times.
Riding the thrust of 2 General Electric engines, the aircraft powers into the sky.
Cactus 1549, 700, climbing 5,000. What a view of the Hudson today.
Yeah.
After takeoff checklist complete.
Flight 1549 is traveling at almost 400 kilometers an hour. It's been in the air for just a minute and a half.
I caught something out of the corner of my eye, and slightly to our right, but still ahead of us, was a line of birds. And they were very, very close, too close for us to maneuver around. And that fast, we were just on top of them.
You can just feel the power of the plane going forward. And then all of a sudden, there was this gigantic boom. It seemed like it stopped in midair, like you hit a brick wall. And then all of a sudden, somebody said, the left engine's on fire.
Uh-oh. Before we could even assess the situation,
We got one roll, both of them rolling back.
both engines rolled back to idle.
Ignition start.
Just 13 seconds after their problems began, Sullenberger takes control of the struggling plane.
My aircraft.
Your aircraft.
Get the QRH. Loss of thrust in both engines.
The QRH, or Quick Reference Handbook, is a step-by-step guide to dealing with emergencies.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Cactus 1549. Hit birds. We've lost thrust in both engines. We're turning back towards LaGuardia.
When a pilot says Mayday or declares an emergency, you go from a focus state to a hyper-focus state. You just focus in on the emergency itself and, figure out the solution to the problem.
Okay, you need to return to LaGuardia. Turn left, heading 220.
220.
All of a sudden, there was a smell that came through the cabin.
Something's burning.
If fuel remaining, engine mode selector, ignition.
What I'm thinking, though, at this point is that, we're just going to have to restart an engine.
Thrust levers. Confirm idle.
Idle.
The procedure is to try to restart the engines, and I always had faith we could do that.
Airspeed optimum relay, 300 knots. We don't have that.
We don't.
Okay, Cactus 1549, if we can get it for you, want to try and land on runway 13.
We're unable.
The conversations with Captain Sullenberger were very short and to the point, which was very appropriate for the emergency. There was a lot going on and wasn't much time to handle it. When Captain Sullenberger simply said unable, it didn't bother me. I mean, he had his hands full flying the airplane, and I understood that. So my job is just to move on to the next option.
All right, Cactus 1549, it's going to be traffic for runway 31.
Unable.
Harton still wants the jet to return to LaGuardia, but Flight 1549 is now just 1,400 feet above the ground.
Cactus 1549, runway 4 is available. If you want to make left, traffic runway 4.
I'm not sure we can make any runway. What's to our right? Anything in New Jersey, Teterboro?
Okay, yeah, off to your right side is Teterboro Airport. You want to try to go to Teterboro?
Teterboro is a small airport on the New Jersey side of the Hudson River, but it's several kilometers away. And without their engines, Flight 1549 is dropping fast.
Want to try to go to Teterboro?
Yes.
When the air traffic controller pointed out Teterboro, I looked at it and I stopped, and I was kind of concerned that he was actually going to try for it. I didn't think we could make it.
So you're sitting there very quietly. People are anxiously waiting for information, and they wanted reassurance that things were going to be okay. You could hear that microphone come on.
This is the captain.
We're hoping he was going to say, I've got this under control, we're going to be okay, we're going to make it, we're going to turn around and go back and land. That's what you were hoping to hear.
Brace for impact.
What does he mean, brace for impact? And then all of a sudden it registered. I think he's saying we're going to crash.
Get your heads down!
I had no idea about how to brace for impact. Everybody's looking around, brace for impact. What do you mean, brace for impact? And how do you brace?
Go ahead. Try number 1.
I put it back on.
Okay, put it back on. Put it back on.
While the crew struggles to fly their stricken plane, Patrick Harton is still trying to find them an airport.
I actually worked Teterboro Airport for about 3 years, so I was very familiar with the airport.
Okay, Cactus 1549, you can land runway 1 at Teterboro.
Can't do it.
Okay, which runway would you like at Teterboro?
We're going to be in the Hudson.
I'm sorry, say again, Cactus?
I could hear him, but my mind really didn't want to comprehend those words.
We're going to be in the Hudson.
That was a death sentence for him, and I didn't want to accept the fact that it was over and there were no more options left.
I don't think we're going back to LaGuardia.
I just emailed my wife and just said, I love you. And I didn't say anything else because I really did not want her to worry.
Okay. Let's go. Put the flaps out.
And I thought to myself, great, the Hudson River was our best opportunity. It was really the only thing in sight where we could land this airplane.
Passengers throughout the plane watch the Hudson rise to meet them and begin making preparations of their own.
So I started thinking about, if we're going to crash, I know I need to figure out where the exit rows are. If the water comes in, you need to be able to hold your breath long enough to get to those 4 or 5 rows and get the doors open if you can.
Got flaps out, 250 feet in the air.
We're not going to be able to get an engine started, so I started calling out airspeeds and altitudes.
170 knots.
To give him a situational awareness of what was going on.
Got flaps 2. A little more.
No, let's stay at 2. Got any ideas?
Actually, not.
We were so focused on what we were doing, and I always thought it would work out.
Below 300 feet, Patrick Harton's radar can't see the plane. Flight 1549 disappears.
When the aircraft disappeared off my radar, I just assumed that there weren't going to be any survivors.
In the cabin, the passengers prepare for the inevitable.
All the passengers really started kind of pulling together, and somebody yelled out as we were going down.
Be ready at the doors.
The folks at the door says, "We're ready." I was just scared to death.
We're going to brace.
Looked like the airplane was going right for the bottom of the Hudson River. All we saw was water cascading over the windshield.
It was like a tornado. Pieces of the plane were being torn apart. Some people were thrown around pretty good.
Then the airplane popped up, and it was just sort of gently rocking in the waves.
We all just sat there. We were all in shock, and we were waiting for what's next.
US Airways Flight 1549 was in the air for just 5 minutes and 8 seconds. Having made a remarkable landing, the passengers and crew now face a new danger. The plane is leaking. The ice-cold water of the Hudson is pouring into the cabin. The crew of Flight 1549 has just performed an extremely difficult aviation feat, but they still have more work to do. Captain Sullenberger heads for the cabin, while First Officer Skiles shuts down the plane.
I stayed behind and did the evacuation checklist, and so it was probably about 45 seconds before I actually went back myself in the cabin after we landed.
In an instant, the $75 million plane has become an unlikely boat floating down the Hudson River. It's now filling with freezing water.
That water was cold. It was very cold, so your feet are freezing. People came to their senses and they said, "Get the doors open, get the doors open."
At air traffic control, Patrick Harton has no idea the plane even made it down safely.
I didn't think anyone could survive a water landing like that. They got me off position, because I was obviously in no condition to work traffic anymore.
Harton is led to his union office. Despite his ordeal, protocol demands he recount his version of events.
I really didn't want to speak to anyone. I just wanted to kind of hide under a rock. I needed my wife to know what had happened, but I knew I couldn't talk to her because I was pretty much in a fragile state and I didn't want to break down. So I sent her a simple text message. I said, "Had a crash, I'm not okay, can't talk now."
Passengers nearest the exits open the doors quickly, while Sullenberger and the cabin crew begin managing the evacuation.
I just jumped up very quickly and started making my way to the emergency door. And so I worked my way out onto the wing, just a few steps to start with. I started noticing that people around me had their flotation devices. They'd pulled up their seat bottoms, or they had a life jacket that they'd taken. I had nothing with me.
Skiles heads back to help the crew in the cabin get passengers out of the sinking plane. He knows there's not much time, and one of the flight attendants has been injured.
I went back to about mid-cabin, and Sully and I and two young men were getting seat cushions and life vests, which are underneath the seats, and we're passing them out.
And I'm looking around trying to assess the situation. Is the plane going to blow up? What's the next step? Yeah, there were actually probably 6 or 8 people that went into the water. And they were shivering and they were cold. We started pulling them back up onto the wing.
At the back of the plane, water continues pouring in. Passengers are directed to move forward to escape.
Go over the seats if you have to.
This unwieldy boat won't be floating much longer.
We were actually in the water, up to our knees, and it was just absolutely freezing cold. Every part of your body that was in that water just ached to the bone.
Come forward! Is there anybody here?
We were very confident there was nobody left on the airplane, but what was going on the wings, we just had no idea.
Skiles and Sullenberger are the last ones off the plane.
I just saw the big splash when the plane just bounced over the water.
A small commercial airline crashed into the water.
They've been in the water more than 10 minutes already.
LaGuardia Airport has sent out an alert to New York's emergency services. In the middle of the Hudson, 155 frozen people hope that help will arrive in time.
I saw the first ferry, and I could see the wheelhouse. I felt like, okay, we're really going to be okay. There was a sigh of relief.
First on the scene are passenger ferries that have been shuttling people across the Hudson. They are eventually joined by the Coast Guard and fire department.
The atmosphere on the ferry was still one of concern because we didn't know whether all the passengers got off the plane at that point in time.
I was sitting in the union office preparing to make my statement.
Where do I start?
And that's when one of my friends popped their head into the office and said, "Hey, Patty, it looks like everyone made it." And I was like, really? That was incredible news. I mean, I was still traumatized by the event itself, but the fact that everyone made it was just, it's like the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulders.
The entire nation looks on as every single passenger and the entire crew of Flight 1549 is brought to safety.
Are you okay?
Like so many others around the world, investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board are riveted to the pictures.
Hey, you gotta see this.
We learned a little bit about the accident, of course, before we launched. The TV channels were showing the aircraft in the river and everything.
All agree that the landing is extraordinary.
I think it was a miracle, and very blessed to have walked away. I reached over to Captain Sully and just said, "I just want you to know you saved my life and everyone's lives here."
In my mind, we were dead, and every one of us came out of that alive. It's a miracle.
By evening, the plane is almost completely underwater. The current is pushing it towards the edge of the river.
The aircraft was tied up against the pier, and we went down to look at it to see what we were up against, of course. But we can't do much at night.
NTSB investigator Harold Reichel arrives on the scene.
The water was dark, of course. We just saw the tail and most of the fuselage, and one of the wings was underneath the water.
We knew it was going to be quite difficult to get it, A, out of the water, and then B, to a place where we could examine the components of the airplane in a more controlled manner.
For investigators, it's an unusual situation. Normally, their main task is to uncover the cause of a crash. With Flight 1549, the cause seems obvious.
Birds.
The original Mayday call was clear.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Cactus 1549. Hit birds. We've lost thrust in both engines. We're turning back towards LaGuardia. Okay, you need to come back.
The crew reported that they hit several birds shortly after takeoff.
I think everybody realized that a bird strike had occurred. What people didn't know was what kind of birds brought the aircraft down, whether it might have been a combination of a bird strike plus something else, whether the crew acted and flew the aircraft as they should have.
My aircraft.
Your aircraft.
Get the QRH.
U.S. Airways pilot made an incredibly skillful emergency landing in the Hudson River.
Investigators want to interview both pilots, but their sudden fame makes them hard to get to.
It became a little bit more difficult than usual to A, locate the flight crew, and then B, to talk to them. They were instant heroes.
Nothing in life can prepare one for the media frenzy of a situation, like this.
And it's not just the pilot's newfound celebrity that's an obstacle for investigators like Catherine Wilson.
One of the most challenging things in this case was nobody wanted to sully Sully. He was a hero in this case, and we were the ones who was potentially going to pick apart what he did and try to find out what he did and whether it was right or not.
To prove that birds caused the crash, authorities need to get the plane out of the water. But a vital piece is missing.
We've been told earlier that both engines were still attached to the aircraft. That turned out not to be true. So that became a major goal right off the bat, was to figure out where that second engine was. We didn't know exactly where it was.
Let's focus on this area.
But we had films of the aircraft actually touching down, and we could cross-reference different things. We used some side-scanning sonar that gave us a very clear picture of the bottom.
It wasn't that easy to do because the Hudson River has a current, and the current changes throughout the day. So it took 3 days, ultimately, to find the engine.
Within days, the recovered engine and the rest of the aircraft are moved to a warehouse in New Jersey, so investigators can study the wreckage more carefully.
We certainly couldn't do it out there at the edge of the Hudson River, and you can imagine how interesting it was to take an airplane 150 or 200 feet long through a very, very populated area in New Jersey.
As the plane is being moved, investigators work with the voice and data recorders.
Okay, let's hear it.
Which were in the most damaged part of the plane, the tail.
The cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder were in virtually pristine shape. The aircraft had sustained quite a bit of damage in the rear end, but the recorders themselves survived very well.
We were really lucky. All of the data was able to be downloaded normally.
We got one roll, both of them rolling back.
Listening to the CVR provides vital insight into how the crew responded to the emergency.
In this case, both Captain Sullenberger and First Officer Skiles acted extremely professionally.
Ignition start.
Each member had their own roles and responsibilities. They stayed with those roles and responsibilities throughout the accident flight and communicated only when necessary.
Put the flaps up.
On Flight 1549,
My aircraft.
it took just seconds for the crew to each assume their individual responsibilities. Part of the reason they handled the emergency so well was that Jeffrey Skiles had only just finished his Airbus training.
This was my first trip out as a regular line pilot in the Airbus A320. I literally was right out of training.
And the benefit of that was that he knew exactly the checklist to turn to, and that's exactly what he did.
Fuel remaining, engine mode selector, ignition.
Crews are highly trained in emergency procedures, and the main thing is to follow procedures in this instance, and that's exactly what First Officer Skiles did by grabbing the quick reference handbook and turning to the appropriate checklist.
But as investigators examine the checklist for restarting this plane's engines, they make a troubling discovery.
It was assembled for an event that occurred 20,000 feet in the air, where a crew would have plenty of time to slowly and carefully go through a 3-page checklist, the end of which was, how do we ditch the airplane?
So it was a 3-page checklist, and really, I only got to about the page and a half through this checklist in the time that we had.
airspeed optimum relay.
The crew spent a lot of time trying to restart the engines when they could have been focusing on preparing the airplane for the ditching.
300 knots. You don't have that.
We don't.
Overly complicated checklists have played a role in deadly plane crashes in the past. In 1998, a fire broke out on board a Swissair passenger jet. The checklist the crew used for that situation would have taken them up to half an hour to complete. It's a half hour they didn't have. But on Flight 1549, the checklist was far from the greatest challenge facing Sullenberger and Skiles.
I'm not sure we can make any runway.
Water landings are notoriously difficult because unless they're perfect, they can be catastrophic. In 1996, after a hijacking, an Ethiopian Airlines captain tried to land off the Comoros Islands when his plane ran out of fuel. His left wing hit the water first, causing the plane to cartwheel. It was ripped to pieces. Of the 175 people on board, only 50 survived. Investigators soon learn that none of the major airlines use simulators to teach pilots how to land on water.
Training for ditching in a simulator is very difficult. We don't have the models to accurately simulate what an airplane would do when it touches down on water. Given the rarity of this type of event, it would be very difficult to justify training pilots for this type of event.
But even without ever going through a simulation, Captain Sullenberger got almost everything right. He kept the nose up and wings level. He let the tail hit the water first, slowing the jet down enough so that it survived the impact.
Nice flying.
NTSB investigators turned to their own simulation to answer a vital question.
This is the captain.
Did Sullenberger have to land in the Hudson?
Brace for impact.
Or could he have made it to a runway?
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Cactus 1549. Hit birds.
Investigators studied Chesley Sullenberger and Jeffrey Skiles' actions in the moments after their plane collided with birds.
Ignition.
We wanted to know, did the pilots do the right thing? So what we did in the simulator was we tested exactly that. Was there enough energy to make it back to LaGuardia? And what we found was that about 50% of the time we were able to make it back to the airport.
But when a 35-second delay is imposed after the bird strike to account for the crew's attempt to restart the engines, all of the simulator pilots crash before reaching the runway.
When we took into consideration the decision-making process that Captain Sullenberger went through, we realized that it was not possible to make it back to the airport.
Cactus 1549, runway 4 is available.
There's no doubt.
We're going to be in the Hudson.
Putting the plane in the Hudson was the right call. Sullenberger didn't have enough altitude to glide to either LaGuardia or Teterboro airports.
Got one roll. Both of them rolling back.
The investigators also discover that Sullenberger made a decision that wasn't at the top of the checklist, one that was critical to the survival of everyone on board.
I'm starting the APU.
On commercial jetliners, the engines provide power to electrical systems. If the engines stop working, the crew eventually loses those systems. The APU is an emergency generator that keeps some things running.
The APU allowed him to still see his screens, the instruments still worked.
It also allowed the A320 itself to assist with the heroic landing. The APU provided power to the plane's electronic brain, stopping the pilots from making any potentially dangerous moves. It kept them inside a so-called flight envelope.
By starting the APU early in the sequence, the flight crew was able to maintain the flight envelope protections, which prevented the airplane from stalling when the airspeed got too slow.
He's right on the edge of stall speed.
The flight data shows that Sullenberger was going slower than the ideal speed.
The airspeed during the accident sequence got about 20 knots slower than it should have been for this flight.
But the A320's flight computer is designed to constantly adjust the plane's pitch and keep it from stalling.
We definitely could have had a much more catastrophic outcome had the airplane actually stalled.
Starting the APU.
Sullenberger's quick thinking made sure the plane's complex computer system kept working. It gave him an automated safety net, so he'd have the best chance to do the nearly impossible.
We're going to be in the Hudson.
It was a combination of a good crew and a good airplane.
Let's go. Put the flaps out.
The captain had the presence of mind, for instance, just before they were about to land, a couple of 100 feet in the air, to turn to the first officer and ask,
"Got any ideas?"
Actually, not.
They were both coordinating right up to the end, and that's what we like to see.
Skill, training, and the aircraft's very design combined to save the lives of 155 people. But investigators still want to know how birds crippled two highly advanced jet engines, and if they can stop it from happening again. 8 days after the crash, investigators are finally able to examine the engines in detail. Richard Dolbear has spent much of his career studying collisions between birds and airplanes.
When aircraft strikes a bird, generally there's not much left of the bird, particularly if that bird goes through the engine.
The engines are analyzed piece by piece to try and figure out exactly what happened 3,000 feet above New York.
Let's look inside.
We expose the engine surfaces to a black light. Proteins from many tissues will fluoresce with a black light. Much of the tissue was already gone, but many of the proteins stayed on the surfaces of the engine.
Look at that.
Deep in the right engine, investigators find about a cup of charred remains.
Most of the remains found were just muscle tissue, bone fragments, and minuscule feather remains. I was able to find about 29 samples in one engine and 14 in the other.
But the engines aren't the only part of the plane that's been damaged.
Birds.
The aircraft hit many birds. So we found evidence on the wings and on the flaps and on the fuselage, but the plane can still fly when that occurs.
The threat posed by bird strikes is well known.
Bird strikes are a much bigger problem than the general public realizes. In the last 20 years, there have been approximately 210 aircraft that have been destroyed because of collisions with birds.
This Boeing 757 ingested a crow while taking off from Manchester, England, later landing safely. In 2008 alone, there were 4 dramatic accidents. A Boeing 747 sucked a kestrel into one of its engines. The crew aborted takeoff and survived. The plane was ruined. This jet ingested pelicans into both engines, and one ended up in the cockpit. Repairs cost $2 million. The engine of an MD-10 was severely damaged by a gadwall. The repair cost was $900,000. And 5 people were killed when this Cessna smashed into at least one pelican. More than 200 people have died in bird strike accidents since 1988. The problem could get worse because there are more birds out there.
By restricting the use of pesticides that were hazardous to birds, such as DDT, we've seen a tremendous rebound in the populations of bird species. A remarkable increase in the Canada geese that are resident, non-migratory birds. Nationwide, the population has grown from about 1 million to about 4 million.
At LaGuardia, one of the airport's biggest problems is a year-round goose colony on nearby Rikers Island.
From the year 2002 to to 2004, there were 8 Canada goose strikes at LaGuardia Airport. It involved birds either on the airport or right off of the airport. One of those strikes almost caused a plane to crash, and it was a very close call.
For the past several years, airport officials have rounded up hundreds of geese from Rikers Island and euthanized them. It's controversial, but should be effective.
So, where did these birds come from?
If the geese that hit US Airways Flight 1549 were local, they can be controlled. Investigators need to know more about them.
The remains that we did find were so small that we couldn't really tell what type of birds. We enlisted the help of the Smithsonian Institution. They can take remains, even very small remains, small pieces of feathers or flesh or whatever, and they can identify them.
The hope is that DNA analysis of the remains will not only confirm the bird's species, but also offer clues as to where they came from. While they wait for answers, investigators turn to answering the question of how a few birds forced a 68-ton jet from the sky. Before they can be used in a passenger jet, engines undergo rigorous testing to prove they can perform under extreme conditions. The tests include ingesting frozen bird carcasses. The CFM turbofan engines that power the A320 passed those tests and were certified in 1996.
The large bird test required for the CFM engine is shooting a 4-pound bird from an air cannon into the engine, which is running at near full power.
To pass, the engines don't have to keep running. They only have to stay together, which they did on Sullenberger's plane.
Well, the engines did not experience what we call uncontained failures. No large chunks of fan blades or anything flew out through the cowls to hurt people inside the airplane.
Fan blades are always the most interesting part to look at, and they often tell quite a story.
A series of fan blades throughout the engine compress incoming air until it's ignited in the core, creating thrust. Ingested birds can wreak havoc on this process.
When a fan blade of an engine fails, it causes a lot of continuing damage. In this particular case, all the fan blades were there. They suffered severe damage, but none were broken.
An analysis of the engines shows that while the primary fan blades survived the impact, the delicate machinery inside the cores of both engines did not.
Uh-oh. We got one roll, both of them rolling back.
Once we went into the engine itself, into the core, we determined that there was significant damage. When a bird gets ingested into the core, it is such a large mass compared to these blades that it does a lot of damage to them.
The birds ingested into Flight 1549.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Cactus 1549.
Ripped apart the engine's compressors. Metal shards from these broken compressors were sucked deep into the cores of both engines, shutting them down.
We've hit birds, we've lost thrust in both engines.
When DNA results come back from the Smithsonian Institution, investigators finally understand why Flight 1549 lost both its engines. The birds that struck Sullenberger and Skiles' aircraft were adult Canada geese. They were far larger than anything the engines were ever tested for.
Because of that analysis, we know that these birds ingested each probably weighed about 10 pounds.
The tests also confirmed that as many as 4 large birds had hit Flight 1549's engines. It was simply too much for them to handle.
Rarely do birds get ingested into the core of the engine. Rarely does an engine ingest the bird and then stop running completely. That's a very rare event.
Ignition start.
But what makes this one even rarer is that both engines ingested birds and both shut down.
We're going to be in the Hudson.
The DNA test also proves that the geese involved in this accident were not the local geese that LaGuardia has worked so hard to manage.
These were geese that had been in northern Canada during the preceding summer. They were migratory geese.
The collision between the migrating geese and Flight 1549 happened 7 kilometers from the airport. It means that none of the existing programs for reducing the number of birds would have prevented the collision. It also means that what happened to that flight could happen again, unless a way can be found to keep birds and planes apart.
Romeo Whiskey 2-1, radar contact, Walsh Report 20 DME southeast Melbourne.
Every year, about 2 million planes pass over New York's airspace.
Most people do not appreciate the problems that birds can cause to aircraft. They don't realize how a small, seemingly insignificant organism in relation to the size of an aircraft can cause these kinds of catastrophic failures.
The airline industry needs to find solutions to bird strikes. Placing screens in front of the engines is one of the most obvious answers, but there are serious drawbacks.
Screens can fall off, screens can break, and then they would be ingested into the engine, causing similar damage or more catastrophic damage.
Screens can also introduce turbulence to the airflow, which can starve the engines of air, causing them to fail. Winter weather is also a serious problem for engine screens.
A screen is a perfect ice builder, and it will accrete ice very quickly in icing conditions.
A more promising solution is already being tested in several American cities, including New York. At John F. Kennedy Airport, specialized radar is sweeping the skies looking for birds near planes. Most airports are equipped with radar that sends out radio waves that simply bounce off objects in the sky. Typically, only large objects are seen, and most of this information isn't passed along to air traffic controllers.
The fact is that their scopes would be cluttered with things. Tall masts from ships, for instance, would pop up on their radar as low targets. The clutter, in fact, would interfere with air traffic control, and that's not a good thing.
But now, finely calibrated avian radar is being tested at JFK. It can distinguish items the size of hummingbirds. If any birds are detected moving through flight paths, crews could be alerted.
I would love to see bird radar technology. The key would be how to incorporate that without increasing workload to an already stressed controller.
Tests continue, but widespread use of avian radar is still years away.
Cactus 1549, runway 4, clear for takeoff.
Cactus 1549, clear for takeoff.
Until then, collisions between birds and planes will continue. What the safe outcome of Flight 1549 proved is that right now, the best defense against this threat is a good team in the cockpit.
We had a very experienced flight crew with very good training.
My aircraft.
Your aircraft.
Get the QRH.
All your training that you've done, all the years that you've been flying the airplanes, it all just comes back to you when you need it.
My aircraft.
Sully and I worked together extremely well on this event. I knew what was in his mind, and he knew what was in my mind. We were both accomplishing our individual roles, but we had a knowledge of the whole situation.
Okay, you need to return to LaGuardia. Turn left, heading 220.
220.
This event definitely puts things in perspective for you as a controller. One thing I appreciate more, the teamwork and how when you work together, you can pretty much accomplish whatever you need to accomplish.
Off to your right side is Teterboro Airport. You want to try and make Teterboro?
We're going to be in the Hudson.
The landing in the Hudson took training and skill. It also took a bit of luck.
We had a very clear day. We had a perfect condition for the river. So there was just a series of really fortunate events that occurred that assisted this crew in landing successfully on the river.
Well, the safety board, we don't really deal in miracles very often, but this event had a lot of things that came together at the right time and the right place. And And so a lot of us are thinking, well, maybe we do have a miracle here.
What a view of the Hudson today.